Labor's most astute political strategists. Will we hear from Maxine or not? That's the question.
Yes, he's doing a good job in mine at the moment. Maybe.
Good evening, everyone. I know you've been here a long time. I'm very sorry to have kept you waiting. This has been an amazing night. A wonderful night for Labor. A fabulous, I hope, transforming moment for the country. Now, something may have happened in the last 20 minutes, but when I last look at the figures, Bennelong is on a knife edge. Bennelong is still on a knife edge. The result is not clear, but what a wonderful, wonderful campaign this has been. What you've all done over the past 6 months is to show in Bennelong that a contest matters. And I can't be sure of the outcome, and maybe we can't by the time we go to bed, if we go to bed tonight. But you know what? I do know one thing. Bennelong will never, ever be taken for granted again. I just want to say a few words about what I've learned about Australia over the past 6 months. I thought I knew this country. As you know, in 30 years of journalism, I've interviewed most prominent Australians. But you know what? I missed some of the best of them. Because some of the best of them are right here in Bennelong. And you only meet them when you knock on their doors or listen to what they say to you in shopping centres, or when you hold a town hall meeting, as we did right here in this hall about 3 months ago. And it was packed out that night, but boy, there's a bigger crowd here tonight. I'm thinking about a lot of people I've met over this campaign, but I'll mention just a couple. I'm thinking of the 90-year-old Sister Louise, who's at St Catherine's, who I met just a couple of weeks ago. She's blind, but the day I talked to her, she said, nobody's blind in heaven. And I'm thinking of 6-year-old Emily at Denniston East. She told me that she'd told her parents to vote for Kevin Rudd because Kevin Rudd would be a great Prime Minister for children. And you know, we need a great Prime Minister for children. And
okay, That was Maxine McHugh, certainly not claiming victory yet in Bennelong, but at this stage leading in the seat. The Prime Minister has a 4.1% margin with 70% of the vote counted. There's been a swing to Maxine McHugh of 5.1%. But Nick, as you were saying earlier, those postals are what may save the Prime Minister?
Well, obviously Maxine and the Labor Party are reading it the same way I am, that it is too early to call it. I think if they felt they could claim victory, they would tonight, but clearly with postal votes still to come, and as I say, some 5,000 odd postal votes, this is going to be next week before we know whether John Howard's retained this seat.
Julia, what are your scrutineers telling you about how those postals might go?
Well, look, we know that the Prime Minister's team did process a lot of the postals, around 60%, I'm advised, so it's going to come right down to the wire. I think you could see that from Maxine, but, I mean, she's already moved a mountain and she's just shown what an unbelievably energetic, focused local campaign can do. Maxine was out there 100% focused on the future of this country and particularly the future of Bennelong. So she's just, you know, worked a miracle. She's been a tremendous candidate for Labor.
Nick mentioned it seemed to me that there was one thing Maxine McHugh could do in Bennelong that the Prime Minister couldn't, and that was door knock. And she's door knocked 8,000 households. And he's the Prime Minister. He can't, I mean, even if he had the time to do it, he couldn't do it with a retinue of security men and media and all the rest of it. So,
well, he actually had a country to run, you know?
That's right. That's right. But I mean, it just struck me at a certain point in the campaign.
Yeah.
It was just one thing he couldn't match.
Well, you know, John Howard had the responsibility of leading our team to try to, and that's extremely difficult when you've only got a 4% margin. I mean, I think as Russell Broadbent quite rightly said, you know, what enormous credit to John Howard that, you know, he could have pulled the plug on a 4% seat. The fact is we never would have won it without John Howard. Yeah. As it stands, we might still hold the seat. I was a bit upset with Maxine saying, you know, quote, Bennelong will never be taken for granted again. I mean, if there's one thing you could say about John Howard, he's never taken Bennelong for granted. He knew he was going to be in for the fight of his life this time. He might still hang on, but he's really worked that seat as hard as an incumbent Prime Minister can work your own seat, which is very difficult.
I would think that it's not going to be all that long now, maybe the next half hour or so, and I'm guessing before the Prime Minister is close to considering when he'll make his appearance. But one of the things, it won't run through his mind tonight, I imagine, but one of the things that must run through his mind in the not too distant future is how long he hangs on in that seat. Because, of course, becomes an immediate issue in a by-election. You've said yourself, nobody else could hold it.
Well, forgive me for not preempting the Prime Minister. I want to hear his statement.
But it's a dilemma for him,
nobody is conceding. Yes, there is a dilemma if we are to lose this election and he just hangs on to Bennelong.
He's been there
then
33
what do we do?
years.
That will depend on if Labor wins, the margin by which they win. If they have a comfortable win, then, you know, obviously a by-election is something that's more contemplatable. But we're jumping ahead of ourselves here.
Well, you are. But no, I am. Well, but I mean, I can.
Yeah,
you can't.
I can't.
But I can't think of a Prime Minister who's sat through 3 years of Parliament once he's no longer Prime Minister.
Yeah, I don't want to hypothesise too much, but no one would want to see him do that.
No.
Can I just indulge myself as a senator and say that one of the fascinating contests tonight was going to be the situation in the Senate and the ACT, because that seat changes hands immediately. And on the figures I've got, with 29% counted, Gary Humphries, the ACT Liberal Senator, will retain his seat. He's got a quota in his own right. So the coalition will retain its majority until June 30.
OK, I'll interrupt you, Nick, because Malcolm Turnbull, the Environment Minister, a minister who had a huge battle on his hands in the seat of Wentworth, has just emerged and he's speaking.
In this climate is something that we can all be very proud of. So I want to thank you all for your support, your hard work. This is your win. And above all, I want to thank the people of Wentworth, the community I love, the community I've lived my whole life with, and that I've traversed from length to length by every bus route imaginable. And you know something, the great thing about this little part of the world in which we live is that everybody's equal. You know, the democracy of the surf the democracy of the Surf Club. I go back to my boyhood, and I see out there one of my father's dearest friends, Reg Marwini, who's been working here today. And, you know, when I used to go down to North Bondi Surf Club with my dad as a little boy, we'd be there in the showers with everybody from the, you know, QCs and judges and surgeons and businessmen to garbos and everybody. The whole range of humanity was there. But we have there's a great egalitarianism in this society in which we live, and you know, we talk about our wonderful beaches and the harbour and the parks and all of those great things we have, but it is the people of Wentworth, the people and the culture of this community, this really Australian egalitarian culture that we share here, that's what really makes this the best part of the best country in the world. And with your support, I'll be working for the next 3 years to ensure that it stays that way. Thank you very much indeed.
That was Malcolm Turnbull, who has retained his seat of Wentworth tonight against enormous opposition. But Malcolm Turnbull may be out of trouble, but there are a number of ministers who've been struggling tonight, and Michael Brissenden is standing by to take us through.
Well, Kerry, as we've already heard a lot about John Howard, the biggest minister of all, who's still in serious trouble in Bennelong. No one's quite prepared to call that one definitively just yet. But let's have a look elsewhere around the cabinet table, and the big story tonight is Longman, where Mal Brough has been defeated in his seat with an almost 10% swing against him. Malcolm Turnbull, as we've just seen, has retained his seat of Wentworth with virtually no swing at all against him. And it is worth noting here that Peter Costello says he hopes to stand as opposition leader unopposed. We can suspect that Mr Turnbull may have other ideas about that. There was some speculation that Green preferences might push Joe Hockey out of North Sydney. Always a wild prediction, but he has easily retained his seat against the former ABC weatherman Mike Bailey. In the Outer Ministry, Peter Dutton, Assistant Treasurer, is in trouble in the seat of Dixon. He defeated Cheryl Curnow in 2001 and looks like he may hold on tonight, although it is still very close there. Fran Bailey, as we've seen, the Small Business Minister, will retain McEwen in Victoria, but only just. Jim Lloyd, the Territories Minister in Robertson, will lose his seat to Belinda Neal from the Labor Party. Gary Nairn, as we've already seen, the Special Minister of State, has lost his seat of Eden Monero, the bellwether seat. Mike Kelly, the former Defence Force lawyer, has won that one for Labor. And in Sturt, the Minister for Ageing, Christopher Pyne, is still in doubt, but will probably hang on. Of course, with Labor now on track to win, even the large number of ministers in the current government who do hang on will be moving out of their ministerial offices pretty soon. Kerry.
Okay, we might actually cross to Fran Kelly, who's been weathering what you might call a storm out on the tally room floor. Fran?
Kerry, yeah, well, as we've heard it and seen it at fever pitch inside the tally room, outside the tally room, the people have been lining up for hours waiting to get in. The queue has been snaking right around the back of the building here. I've got Pat and John here with me. How long have you two been here?
2 hours, 2.5 hours.
Yep, getting close to that.
Yeah. Why are you prepared to wait?
This is such a momentous event, hopefully a change of government in Australia. We live in Canberra and we're really happy to be here as part of this process.
I know you've been listening to the broadcast while you've been here. A lot of things have happened in those 2 hours, and we just heard, of course, the Labor looks as though clearly won this election. Maxine McHugh not quite prepared to call it, but what have you been feeling about this result?
I think it's a great message to the Liberal Party that it's time's up and they've got to move on.
OK, let's check out some others and see how they're feeling. Come on. Are you excited? What's your feeling here? Why are you lining up?
As my husband has seen.
We're tourists. So come to see what the Australian people have to say. And, well, the Australian people have spoken, and I think they've spoken well. They seem to stand for a population that works, a population that is free to say what it has to say, and I think that's it.
Thank you.
Good luck on you.
There's all sorts of people out here. How long have you been lining up?
Not for very long, about maybe 20 minutes or so.
And what made you decide to make the dash to the tally room?
11 and a half years is too long, and we're here to celebrate, basically.
You don't mind it that it seems to be all over by the shouting?
Oh, not at all. No, oh no, there's going to be lots more shouting for quite a while.
It's just starting.
You prepared to line up here? What do you think about... No, the young fella's backing away from me. What about you? Why are you so determined to get inside there?
Because I'm thrilled to bits. A change of government. It's a great night.
Have you been to the tally room in past elections?
No, I haven't, and I'm making it there. I'll wait all night if I have to.
They're getting pretty excited out here, Kerry. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. I suppose it's probably a safe assumption when people feel a swing is on, then those who want the change are the ones most likely to turn up. We've actually got, we haven't heard tonight from the Greens and how well they may have performed, and also how well they think they're going to do in the Senate, where they and others may well end up with the balance of power. But Bob Brown is standing by, and Tony Jones is about to cross to him.
Bob Brown, thanks for joining us. And let me start by asking you, that's okay, let me start by asking you what, it's predictable I suppose what you're going to say, but let me start by asking you what message voters have delivered tonight in your view.
Well, Tony, it's a great vote for the Greens here in Tasmania. This is the biggest vote in the Senate for a third political party in Australian history, and it's a huge vote against the pulp mill and for saving Tasmania's forests. But it's more than that. The enormous vote for Labor and this sweeping victory for Kevin Rudd and the new government means that Australians want to fix climate change, they want a more socially just country, and they've voted for it very strongly tonight.
Bob, the Greens vote nationally, the figures I've been given, only up 0.6% since the last election. Is that because of the strong vote that Labor is picking up everywhere?
Yes, a big squeeze there because of the swing to Labor, but what a remarkable thing for the Greens to stay in front. And in Melbourne, for example, up around 25%, we've leapfrogged the Liberals, putting us into a great position to be taking seats further down the line in the House of Representatives. In the Senate, we're up 2 to 3% right across the country on early counts, and here in Tasmania, we've busted that barrier of a quota. We've gone way above that, and we're moving towards a second quota in the future. Andrew Wilkie's not out of the race yet. I predict we'll pick up a Senate seat in Victoria with Richard Di Natale. Kerry Nettles got a strong chance in New South Wales. The last figures coming in from Queensland are improving, and I think we'll pick up a seat in Western Australia. Not certain yet, but there won't be a hostile Senate. But if there is a Greens in the balance of power, we'll be working with the next government to make sure all Australians get a better outcome.
Bob, how long before you will actually know the Senate result for the Greens, Bob? Just wait for your supporters. That's all right. How long do you think it will be before you've got a clear picture of the Senate position for the Greens?
Oh, look, it'll be weeks. It's the inevitable wait in a proportional representation situation, and that sixth seat in the states is going to take, and indeed in the second seat in the ACT won't finally be determined until those postal votes come in. The Bushwalker factor comes to play, which we've seen so often bring the Greens up at the end and help us to get across and win seats. But what a great result for the Greens too. In seats all over the country tonight, Labor has won on Greens preferences, and that's a message to the new government. This is a message for greening Australia as well as a more caring Australia. And you know, the challenge there on climate change, on putting this country back into the front seat in terms of redirecting its economy away from coal, away from burning forests, into the renewable energy efficiency age. Australians have spoken very strongly about that tonight.
Bob Brown, I'll make one obvious point, considering all the no pulp mill signs behind you, and that is that the Greens have helped put a lot of Labor people into seats all of those Labor people, if they follow the party policy, support the pulp mill?
I think tonight was a massive vote against the pulp mill, not the least in Bennelong, and what a great win for Labor and Maxine if she holds on there. But the pulp mill, if the government done the right thing, would be Prime Minister Howard would be retaining Bennelong and would retain a number of seats across the country. Those 2 northern seats in Tasmania, 3 seats, big vote against the pulp mill right across Tasmania, but the 2 seats going to Labor, very much on Greens preferences. You can see that in Melbourne, you can see it elsewhere in the country. And the pulp mill was the single most defining environmental issue which has made this huge swing against the government to the opposition through the Greens.
Yes, but I simply make the point again, Bob Brown, that the opposition, the Labor Party, support the building of the pulp mill. Now, I don't suppose you expect them to change their minds on that now that they've won government.
Oh, yes, I do. My word, I do. This is a government which has now to look at the final information coming in. The next Minister for the Environment has the total authority, responsibility to determine whether or not the pulp mill goes ahead, and 200,000 football fields of forest are destroyed, and the farmers and the fishers and the tourist industry are threatened by this pulp mill. A very big start for reshaping and redirecting Australia against the awesome output of greenhouse gases from this pulp mill will be for the Rudd government to say this pulp mill will not be built in the Tamar Valley and along the lines which Gunns have put forward. It's an anathema to the Australian people, but particularly to the Tamar Valley. Tasmanians have voted enormously against it tonight, and it's a test of the Rudd government and its new direction that it will take this pulp mill in the Tamar Valley and give it the thumbs down.
Bob Brown, we'll have to leave you there. We thank you very much for coming out with all your supporters to join us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, with nearly 70% of the vote counted, the two-party preferred vote favouring Labor is 53% to 47% for the coalition. And if we look at that represents, by the way, a swing of 5.7%. It's been moving around the mid-fives up to about 6, coming back a little bit, but around 5.7%. It's yet to be absolutely clear how many seats that turns into, but let's take a look at the scoreboard, which shows that the Liberals have 36.4% of the primary vote, giving them 48 definite seats. We're saying they've lost 19 seats now. The Nationals 5.4% gives them 10 seats. They've lost 3. The ALP around that 43.6% primary vote mark, staying pretty solid there. 81 seats, we're saying they've won, a gain of 22 seats. And we might look at the scoreboard, Anthony, and take the chamber, and then move on and take a look at Queensland. So the number of seats won.
We're having a look at the definitely seats given away, 81 to 58 for the coalition. That's the seats we're definitely giving away. Got a few more seats that we give away as being likely gains for one party or the other. Gets Labor up to 83 with 59 for the coalition. And when we make a stab at a prediction, those numbers go up to 86 for Labor, 52 to the Liberals, 10 for the Nationals. It's an overall Labor majority of 22 at this stage.
Okay, can we look at the trends?
We have some changing seats to look at first. We've been giving away, this is the list of all the seats we're giving away. We've got one seat there where we've got Labor is behind in Cowan, which is one seat we're looking at the moment. But you can see the range of seats there that we've got being given away. We've got a second page of this is Bass, Bennelong, Blair, Bonner. We've got Dawson, which is the shock, huge swing, 13.6. 9% there in Dixon, unseating a minister. DeBell, no, that one's not finalised. DeBell's fallen to Labor. Eden Monero, the bellwether. Flynn, we've got as a Labor gain after a 10% swing. Chris Trevor from Gladstone. Ford, 14.4% has fallen to Labor. Hasluck, Labor is ahead, though that one's still in doubt. We have another page now. Herbert is still in doubt. Kingston's gone in South Australia. Leichhardt in the far north, nearly 15%. Lindsay, a 10% swing's fallen to Labor. 10% in Longman. Malbrough defeated. Macon's fallen to Labor with a 9% swing. Morton, 7%. Page, an 8% swing, has been gained by Labor on the north coast of New South Wales. And still more. Parramatta's been gained. Petrie's been gained. Robertson's been gained. Solomon's still in doubt, and Labor's now ahead in that seat. We've got the Liberals gaining Swan. I haven't had a close look at those figures in Western Australia. And the Labor Party has gained Wakefield. And if we look at the overall percentage votes by party, you can see in terms of the change in the primary vote, a big swing to Labor, 5.9%. Their primary vote is up. The Coalition, their vote does seem to have come back in the last couple of days, and certainly there's more minor party vote than was suggested by some earlier polls in this campaign. Family First polled 1.9% there, the Greens 7.8%. The Democrats are down to 0.7% at this election. And I've asked for one more graphic, which is Queensland. And the reason for this is 50.7%, swing of 7.8%. This is only the third time since the war that Labor's got a majority of the two-party preferred vote in Queensland. So certainly the Queenslanders decided they seem to want a Queenslander for Prime Minister. They've won the Sheffield Shield, now they've got a Prime Minister. It's the first elected Prime Minister since Fisher in the First World War. They've had both Fadden and Ford filled in briefly. But certainly Labor's got 16 seats in Queensland, which is over half the seats, and given how paltry their representation has been. This result's been decided in New South Wales and Queensland. They were the states which gave the Howard government its majority in 1998 and 2001 and also in 2004. This time, Labor's got a majority in both.
OK, we're going to cross very quickly to Malbrough in his seat of Longman, because he had a margin of 6.7% there. It would appear he's lost his seat. Now, can you tell me, is he standing by? OK, Malbrough.
As an Australian, I am very, very proud of the chance that I've had to represent the country at the highest level. The work that we have commenced in the Northern Territory, I just hope and pray continues. I took the chance during this campaign to go back out to places like Hermannsburg and to Mutijulu, and I saw in the eyes of the women out there their desperate need to see this continue. So I have a plea to Mr. Rudd that I know that you don't agree with much of what I've done out there, but not for me, not for some ideology, but for the children of the next generation, please give them a chance, give this a chance to work. There are great people out there on the ground doing that. I also just want to take the chance to thank my family, my wife Sue and my 3 children, Thomas, Sarah and James, and my mum and dad, who have just been a power of strength, have allowed me to do what I do and to give me this opportunity. It has been an immense pleasure and privilege to be part of a cabinet that has been led by John Howard and Peter Costello. When the history books have written, these 2 men will be revered for what they have done. A debt-free country, full employment, and a place where people actually know that they've got a positive future. So this is not a policy speech, it's something I'm just really proud and pleased to be part of and to see the growth of my community here. So that's it for me. Happy to take some questions. I wish Mr. Rudd and his team all the best, and John Sullivan, the Labor candidate here, who will become the next member for Longman, the second member for Longman. Up to now I've been able to say I was the best. Only been one, but I wish him all the best in his endeavours to support and work with the community of Caboolture and the wider area of Longman.
That was Malbrough trying in the face of adversity to retain at least a little bit of a sense of humour as he conceded the loss of his seat tonight, one of 10 seats that have fallen to Labor in Queensland alone. Now we're going to continue our seat run, and there are some seats that have remained in doubt. The seat of Latrobe in Victoria, I'm not quite sure what it's showing, but this is the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne, with 75% of the vote counted. Jason Woods held this seat in 2004, margin of 5.8%. Anthony?
Yes, well, Jason Woods, this is a seat which has been constantly visited through the campaign. Rodney Cox is a former Victorian of the Year. He's a well-credentialed former military officer. Jason Wood used to work in the counter-terrorism branch of the Victorian Police. At this stage, with some Green preferences get Labor close, we're calling it a 5.6% with the Liberals ahead. I would expect, with Jason Wood having been a member for a term, that he would actually do better on the postal votes. So I think that one looks like Jason Wood will be re-elected, and Rodney Cox's campaign campaign looks like it's fallen at the final hurdle.
Okay, back to Queensland and another seat with a big question mark over it. This is the seat of Herbert, based around Townsville. 55% of the vote counted. The sitting member is Peter Lindsay for the Liberal Party. He's held it since '96 on a margin of 6.2%, but very tight.
And Peter Lindsay is up against George Colburn, who runs a series of a chain of McDonald's in Townsville, so he's very well known. He's the neck and neck on the primary votes. There's a small vote for the other parties in this election, only about 10%. You often get the minor party votes squeezed out in marginal seats. And there's a 6.3% swing, which puts Labor just ahead, so that one remains in doubt.
Okay, can we have a look at the seat of Cowan in Western Australia? This is another question mark seat. Very fine margin held by Labor, but very popular local member Graham Edwards retiring. 47% of the vote counted. Anthony?
Yes, and 14 of the 36 booths with preference counts. Liz Prime is ahead on the primaries, but this is an electorate with two ends. It's got quite a range of booths. It's got housing commission areas. It's got much more affluent districts. And we're saying on a matched booth basis there's a 1.2% swing to the Liberals. And at this stage, 50.5 is still in doubt. And that will be a lot more counting, another 2/3 of the booths to come in yet. So that one remains in doubt.
Okay, the seat of Kingston in South Australia. This is the most marginal seat in the country. 0.1% for the Liberals, held by Kim Richardson, but this seat has changed hands tonight.
It's Amanda Rishworth will be the new member for Kingston. As you can see on the primaries, she's well ahead. Robert Brokenshire for the Family First Party got 5.6% of the vote. He's a former state Liberal MP from state, and he actually stood for Family First at this election. Amanda Rishworth is well ahead on the primary votes. After the distribution of preferences, we're seeing a swing of 4.3%, and Labor has gained Kingston. It was always going to be a very tough seat to hold.
Okay, now, the seat of Solomon. Earlier tonight, it was looking like it might stay with the government, or stay with the coalition. Dave Tollner is the sitting member since 2001, a margin of 2.8%, 63% of the vote counted. Anthony?
Yes, so Damien Hale came to some prominence for having a nightclub incident with a certain Chris Tarrant from the Fremantle Football Club earlier in the year, and hasn't done his prospects any harm. He's behind on the primaries. We're factoring in where the preferences are going. We got 19 of the 24 booths, and at this stage, he's putting Labor slightly ahead. That's in doubt. I think I've got slightly updated figures which get the swing up to 3.4%, but at this stage, he's leaning towards Labor, but that one remains in doubt.
Okay. Julia Gillard, just slip back to Latrobe for a moment. You're not. What do you? That's very tight, but the Liberals still in front.
Yeah, it's very tight. The Liberals are in front. That's true. At this stage, we just want to keep an eye on it, but it's looking pretty tough for Rodney Cox, who's a tremendous candidate and campaigned very hard in that seat.
What about some of those other doubtfuls?
Well, we're getting the WA results through now, and obviously Swan, we've got some difficulties there. Kim Wilkie, I've got 12% of the vote counted and us down 2.5, a swing against us of 2.5. I'd agree with Anthony's figures on Cowan. I think we're in some difficulty there. We seem to be doing better in Hasluck.
Is that any way to treat a Deputy Prime Minister-elect?
They're an enthusiastic crowd, that's true. Very enthusiastic crowd, which is very sweet.
At least this one, I think, is spontaneous.
Yes.
we might actually move a little further away from the noise and cross to Tony, who might seek a bit more guidance on Western Australia from
Indeed,
Stephen Smith.
I've got Stephen Smith. I've also got the Liberal Senator Mitch Fifield from Victoria, but I'll start with Stephen Smith because I know that you've got a much better or clearer picture now of what's happened in Western Australia.
Mate, if I can just be a bit self-indulgent, can I firstly thank my Anne and my staff in my office counting. My mum and dad are also there. There's about a 3 or a 4% swing to us in Perth. Thanks to all my long-standing supporters in Perth. That's personal good news, obviously. I think the rest is a bit of bad news. I think we've won the seat of Hasluck, but I think we're in trouble in Stirling and Cowan and Swan. Swan, I think, will go down to the wire, but if you had to call it now, then I think we're one down in the west. I think we've lost Swan and Cowan, but we've picked up Hasluck. And in my seat, Hasluck abuts my seat to the north and the east. And we're getting good swings in, if you like, the traditional Labor areas, and that's, I think, the thing that'll get Hasluck across the line. So I think if you called it now a win in Hasluck, but I think, regrettably, Kim Wilkie, I think, is in trouble in Swan. Cowan and Sterling, I think, are bad for us.
You think a Rudd government will punish the West Australians for not following along with the bandwagon?
No, I think a Rudd Labor government will absolutely make sure that it goes to the West on a regular basis. Kevin has already committed to the first regional cabinet meeting there. We will put all of our policy and political effort into the West as the great economic horsepower of the Commonwealth.
I was being facetious, of course. But let me go to Senator Mitch Feinfeld. And let me just ask you this. I mean, we heard from Judith Troth earlier. She said she'd prepared herself emotionally and psychologically for this. She, in a way, seemed to be suggesting she knew the writing was on the wall. Is that true of you as well, and many others in the coalition?
Well, I think as a political professional, you look at the polls have been consistently against us for the best part of a year. You do emotionally prepare yourself for that outcome.
And what do you believe the outcome will bring for the Liberal Party? Because there's going to be a lot of soul-searching now.
Well, it'll be a big job to rebuild. This is unique. Never before have we been in a situation where the Liberal Party won't be in government in any state, territory or federal parliament.
And do you have any, I mean, it's obviously hard to think about that rebuilding process now, but how will it take place? And will it start, in fact, with looking at who was responsible for what's happened here? I mean, I'm talking about the campaign team all the way through to the leadership.
Well, you have to review everything. I think if we just take the area of policy firstly, I wouldn't see this election as a rejection of our policy settings. This could perhaps be the first time that an opposition has ridden into office on the back of the policies of an incumbent government.
So, well, when you say you have to look at everything, would you have to look at the co-responsibility of the leadership team that was put forward to the Australian people here? And I mean, obviously, John Howard and Peter Costello, as they put themselves forward as the two that you are going to get in the one term?
Well, we've got to take a look at that strategy, whether we gave the Australian people a clear enough choice. We have to take the message that the Australian people have given us. It's a night for being magnanimous, for acknowledging that the Australian people have made a clear choice, a clear decision, and we have to take that on board. Mitch,
I mentioned before that you're obviously close to Peter Costello. Pitch yourself back a year. Should he have been put into office, into the, obviously the office of Prime Minister, to run this election, and would it have made any difference at all?
Well, it's one of those things that we'll never know. You can't run a hypothetical scenario before the Australian people, but we do have to take the message from the voters. They have gone for change, and ultimately these matters of leadership are ones which are the responsibility of the federal parliamentary party to address. So I think it would be unfair to put the election result at the feet of any one person. Ultimately, the federal parliamentary party takes collective responsibility.
I've got to ask you this. I mean, has Peter Costello and his future leadership prospects been damaged since he put his name alongside John Howard's as the two people who were going to run the country?
Well, Peter is, I think, our greatest electoral asset. The party will support Peter in whatever he wants to do in the future.
Are you absolutely sure about that? I mean, we saw a pretty buoyant Malcolm Turnbull there. He's just come through adversity and won his seat. I know that Peter Costello won't have lost his either, but Malcolm Turnbull is not tainted by this loss. Peter Costello may well be.
Well, it's a collective responsibility, this result, but I don't know what Peter wants to do in the future, but I've got no doubt at all that the party would support him in whatever he decides.
Is it your instinct, knowing him, that he would in fact like to retain the leadership even in opposition?
I've learnt long ago never to seek to speak for Peter, but we would support him in whatever he wanted to do. Those are questions for tomorrow. Tonight really is the night of the party leaders, of Mr Rudd and Mr Howard. We should look to see what they have to say to the Australian people shortly.
Back to you, Stephen. Your thoughts on, on not only on Western Australia, but on what actually happened in this campaign, and whether what the message was that was being essentially delivered by Australian voters today.
Well, I think there are four main factors why Labor has won. Firstly, the Howard Costello government got control of the Senate, and John Howard reverted to type. Howard got elected in 1996 by not being two things, by not being federal Labor and not being the John Howard of old. When he got control of the Senate, he reverted to the John Howard of old. That was best exemplified by work choices, an attack upon people's take-home pay. Okay. The third factor, very quickly, was he didn't follow Keith Miller's rule of retirement when they're all screaming for you to say it's time to go. And the final factor, where Kevin Rudd has been so effective, you've got to show that you've got a safe pair of hands you can move
Stephen,
to.
I've got to jump in and cut you off there. I'm sorry about that. Back to you, Kerry.
Thanks for that, Tony. We've heard that the Prime Minister has rung Kevin Rudd, the Labor leader, to concede defeat, and he has left Kirribilli House for the Wentworth Hotel, where he will confirm that message to the rest of Australia. And as that's happening, we should reflect, I suppose, on what has been one of the two notable things tonight. One, the end of a remarkable political career, and as that comes to an end, a remarkable victory by a relatively new Member of Parliament, comparatively speaking, who has pulled off a quite incredible victory in historic terms, in terms of the size of the swing and the number of seats made up. So we'll talk further about those things while we wait for both leaders to appear. But of course, Kevin Rudd will wait as a matter of protocol for the Prime Minister to concede before he appears. Nick Minchin, it has been a story with John Howard of incredible. Well, there's a number of characteristics, aren't there? You know, the man that would never concede. Really, I mean, every time he was knocked down, he came back up. He was Lazarus with the triple bypass, and when he did eventually make it as Prime Minister, he stayed for nearly 12 years.
Well, I would hope tonight that even Labor voters would concede some of the great things John Howard has done for the country. Yes, I accept that Labor people and Labor supporters have their complaints, but John Howard has been an extraordinary leader for this country. Particularly, I think of the times when he's led us through tragedies. The shooting in Hobart, the Port Arthur massacre, the Bali, the 9/11. The Prime Minister has done an extraordinary job in uniting the country at those really difficult times, and I would hope all Australians would genuinely concede the leadership he's shown in those difficult circumstances. The country is enjoying extraordinary prosperity, unemployment low, all those things. I won't recite them, you know what I mean. But John Howard it's been a privilege for me to work for him to have been Prime Minister for this length of time, through the sort of difficulties we've had, to keep this country growing and prosperous, and really to take on some really tough things. I mean, nobody ever thought you could introduce a goods and services tax in government the way we did. Our industrial relations reforms may well have cost us this election, but we knew they were risky, but we really believed they were the right thing to do to this country. So all I can do is pay incredible tribute to John Howard tonight. I'm so sorry to see this happen tonight, obviously. To see a man like John Howard possibly lose his seat and lose government is frankly tragic for those of us on the Conservative side of politics. But tonight's a night to pay tribute to an extraordinary leader.
Julia Gillard, what are the positives that you're prepared to acknowledge about John Howard's time in office?
Oh, I'd actually echo a number of things that Nick has said. I mean, this is a man who devoted his entire life to public service. You've got to admire that, and I do. He's led the nation through some difficult periods. I did admire the Prime Minister when in very difficult circumstances he achieved better gun laws in this country. It was obviously divisive amongst his own support base, and he stood up and did it. That gets a very big tick from me. There have been times when this nation's obviously faced great tragedy, like Bali, when John Howard's led the nation in mourning. So once again, I would acknowledge that with respect. I obviously don't agree with his policies, and have campaigned to make Kevin Rudd Prime Minister. But I think John Howard will be remembered when people in the future reflect back on this time in Australian life. He will be remembered with respect and I suspect some affection as well.
Nick mentioned so few successful political leaders have been able to nominate the timing of their own departure. It was within John Howard's grasp to do that, but it must always be for any leader an incredible fine call to know when to do it, both for your own personal sake as well as for your party.
Oh, it is the toughest call, but the fact is the clear consensus in the party was that John Howard should stay. I mean, he was responding to the will of the party, and it was the will of the party that he stay and lead us to this election. There was great belief that if anyone could win 5 elections, it was John Howard. In that sense, now, obviously with hindsight, you might say, well, perhaps he should have retired, but I don't say that because I think he responded to the party. The party wanted him to lead us to this election. We knew that only he would have a chance of winning Bennelong in any event, and we couldn't afford to lose, right off a seat. And with an extraordinary track record of success. But that will always, there'll always now be that question. But I applaud him for hanging in there.
With hindsight, are you now able to make sense of that strange period where John Howard asked Alexander Downer to take soundings amongst his cabinet colleagues while the APEC was going on? They thought about it. They didn't say, you must go. But in response to their question, it seemed they gave him an honest answer which, as I understand it, we think perhaps on the balance, maybe it would be better if you did. And he then decided not to. And look, as a journalist looking in on that exercise, I'm thinking, well, even if he had acted on the advice at that late stage, that had the potential to be disastrous.
Well, Kerry, I hope you'll forgive me, but tonight is a night to celebrate an extraordinary political career and great leadership of this country. There'll be plenty of opportunity to go over the entrails of what happened when and why. And I don't think I should indulge myself in that. I might have something to say later about it. But tonight I really hope the nation will focus on thanking John Howard for the leadership he's given this country over a long period of time through often very difficult circumstances and celebrate a great career and wish him very well in his future. I hope that's the mood of the nation.
And while we wait to find out whether he has suffered a double blow tonight with the loss of his seat, he does go down in history at this moment as Australia's second most successful Prime Minister.
Exactly.
So
and that'll be
we might
keep for a long time.
While we're waiting for for the two leaders to appear, we'll keep the game moving, and we'll come back and take another look at the seat of Cowan in Western Australia, Perth's northern suburbs. 65% of the vote counted. Graham Edwards, the popular local member, retiring. 0.8% margin. Very hard to defend if there was no swing on for Labor in Western Australia.
And Luke Simpkins is the Liberal candidate. He stood last time. Liz Prime, the new Labor candidate. Simpkins is ahead on the primary votes at this stage. There's not much of a vote there for minor parties. We have 20 of the 36 booths with a preference count, and they're indicating there's a 1.3% swing to the Liberal Party, and that leaves the seat in doubt. That one will come down to who has a better organised postal vote campaign.
Well, Luke Simpkins actually joins us in Cowan now. Luke Simpkins, too close to call, but you are bucking the national trend, a Liberal who appears to be winning a Labor seat.
Well, the figures so far are pretty encouraging, but I think, yes, we've got a fair way to go.
Tell me, why do you think it's different in Western Australia?
Well, look, we campaigned very strongly on local issues, and I think that resonated with people, particularly when with the position of the state government over here. And of course, I appreciate the support the Prime Minister showed me, and I think that also was very important for the good showing we've had so far.
I mean, do you think the political culture there, or this proves in some way, and I'm not talking just about your seat, but the other seats in Western Australia, what's happening there proves there's some kind of different political culture in Western Australia to the rest of the country at the moment?
Well, I don't think Western Australia takes any leads from the rest of the country, and I think that has been a positive tonight.
Well, we'll have to wait and see how you go. It certainly looks like at this stage you may be... Well, in fact, we could say this. The Liberals have lost a former army officer in Queensland, in Mal Brough. They may have actually gained one in Western Australia.
Well, look, it's a great shame. Mal Brough was a great help to me during this campaign, but there's a little bit of time to go before we make a call on Cowan.
Indeed, indeed. If you do actually win the seat, you'll be joining an opposition rather than a government. How disappointed are you at that prospect?
Well, it would have been great to come in government, but there's so much that needs to be done in Cowan. I look forward to getting stuck into things, should I be elected, and making a real difference for the people of Cowan, because that's what they want.
All right, Luke Simpkins, we'll leave you and your supporters. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
OK, we're going to keep these seat runs going now. Back to Queensland, the seat of Bowman, which earlier tonight looked like it would be one that the Liberal Party would retain with Andrew Laming as the local member. He's only been there one term, but he was on a margin of 8.9%. He'd struck trouble. A lot of people were expecting him to lose his seat tonight, and it's now appears to be line ball, Anthony.
Yes. I thought that was Mitch Fifield in the picture for a moment, but it looks very similar. Andrew Laming, the Liberal candidate there against Jason Young, he's ahead on the primary votes. There's a small vote there for the Greens. We've got a count in all 32 booths in this district, and at the end of the night, it's I've actually got it 50-50 with some slightly later figures, and I have Labor ahead by 379 votes, so that seat remains in doubt.
OK, the seat of Hasluck in metropolitan Perth, the Liberal seat, a margin of 1.8%. Stuart Henry's held it for one term, but with 53% of the vote counted, he's in serious trouble.
And Sharon Jackson, who was the former member that Stuart Henry defeated in 2004, has returned to reconquest the seat and reconquer the seat. She's ahead on the primary votes. There's a significant vote there for the Greens, and that seat will go on to be a 3.6% swing to the Labor Party, and Sharon Jackson will return to the Parliament again as a member for Hasluck.
OK, both sides could record losses tonight. Swan, another very tight Labor seat, inner southern suburbs, margin of 0.1%, 62% of the vote counted, Anthony.
And Kim Wilkie's had a very strange career. He's been a speedway driver, he's been a parole officer, he's quite a varied career, and he's been a member of Parliament since 1998. At the moment, he's in a great deal of difficulty, and I think he'll really struggle to be re-elected on those figures. Steve Irons played one AFL game for a waffle club in a number of reserve games. He's been seen a lot walking with the Prime Minister along the banks of the Swan, and it looks like on these figures that while it's still in doubt, Steve Irons is certainly well positioned to go on and win that seat, though Wilkie did come from behind last time as well.
OK, one of the interesting seats in South Australia that's not going to change hands, but nonetheless 76% of the vote counted in Alexander Downer's seat of Mayo, and that's the Adelaide Hills in the eastern suburbs. He had a margin of 13.6%. He's still got the seat, but the margin has shrunk.
He certainly has. He's got the same sort of swing that's occurred in most South Australian seats. The swing was 6.5% to 7%. In this seat, Alexander, he hasn't gone to preferences, which he has been forced to in the past. But this is a seat that a high-profile independent might bother the Liberal incumbent, but it's not the sort of seat the Labor Party would win. And we're seeing a swing at this stage of 7.2% to the Labor Party, which is in line with the swing we've seen in other South Australian seats.
We're now going to try another seat run on a slightly different theme, one that plays to a theme that the Liberal Party has been running during the campaign, and that is trade unionists coming into the Parliament. High-profile trade unionists.
No graphics.
The seat of Charlton in the New South Wales Hunter region. Well, this is a seat where Greg Combet is coming into the Parliament.
Yeah, and Greg Combet's been easily elected. He's got a 4.5% swing to him, and Greg Combet replaces Kerry Hoare as a member for Charlton. And
we look at the seat of Corio now. This is a seat based largely around Geelong. This was where Gavin O'Connor was the sitting member, but he lost his pre-selection and contested it as an independent. And Richard Marles was coming in.
Gavin O'Connor's polled 12.6%. So Richard Marles has been forced to preferences, but he still wins comfortably. There's a 3.5% swing to Labor, and Richard Marles is another unionist into the Parliament, along with another high-profile unionist in Maribyrnong, where Bill Shorten is very easily returned to 5.5% swing. Bill Shorten is the new member for Maribyrnong.
And we'll be interested to see which of these make it into the front bench.
Well, Bill
Any
and
fast tracking, do you think, Julia?
Well, Bill and Greg are both great additions to the Parliament. Obviously, there's been a campaign about former union officials, but I think Greg Combet is probably best known to the Australian community as the man who campaigned for Bernie Banton and other asbestos victims in the struggle with James Hardie. And of course, Bernie Banton is gravely ill, but has just won a victory against James Hardie. So Bill, is a tremendous candidate too. He's a very talented man. He's going to make a contribution to Labor. If you can just indulge me one moment, Kerry, we obviously go through the seats quickly, and behind every seat story there's a human story. I'm sure Nick would acknowledge that. Kim Wilkie's been in the Parliament the same amount of time as I have, 1998. He's obviously in difficulties. He's a tremendous campaigner, so we will see what happens with that seat, but obviously it looks like it could be a very tough experience for Kim, who's been a contributor. Sharon Jackson in Hasluck, she's been in the Parliament before. It looks like she might make a return to the Parliament. She's been a very dedicated campaigner in that seat, and so that is hard work rewarded. Obviously Liz Prime in Cowan, seeking to replace Graham Edwards, has struggled too, but she campaigned very hard. And if you could completely indulge me, the seat of Lawler, I think Nick might have conceded this one very early for me. The seat of Lawler has been retained by me for the Labor Party with a 7.4% swing, I'm informed, and I'd really like to say thanks to my campaign team who would be watching tonight, ably led by Terry Brax, who has worked for me in the past, and to Erin, to Michelle, to Vicky, to Carlos, to JB, to Robert. Thank you very much.
So it's one of the great skills of a politician is never to forget anybody's name. But Nick mentioned you were on the phone when we were looking at the seat of Mayo, Alexander Downer's seat. Swing of 7.2%. He's had worse than that actually a few years ago. Yeah. But you're sort of in the same boat. Him particularly, I guess. Some of you are going to face some tough decisions, aren't you? Because to come back into opposition, when you've been in opposition before, you've made it into government, you've been in government for a long time, to then go back into opposition psychologically, it'd be very, very tough.
Well, tough on Alexander. He had 12 years in opposition. Virtually the whole time that Labor was in government, he was in opposition before we came to government.
And you'd have to ask the question of whether he'll have the heart to see through another 3 years.
Well, he's obviously going to have to think carefully about his future.
Sorry, we're going to stop now because we got Peter Costello making an appearance ahead of the Prime Minister. Probably, almost certainly, the next opposition leader for the coalition. We haven't seen the figures for Higgins tonight. I'm not sure what. Here we go.
To me and my family to see such a wonderful group of people here tonight, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for working all day today and for working on this campaign and for making this, I believe, the best campaign we've ever had in Higgins. Thank you very, very much. The results that have been posted tonight, which of course don't include postal votes, and we have 5,000 postal votes in the pot, show a swing absent of postal votes of about 1.8% against us here in Higgins, but when the postal votes are taken into account, we will have a swing to us in the seat of Higgins. Can I say, as I went around 37 booths today and I saw so many people who were working so hard, doing your bit for our campaign and for our country, doing it on a voluntary basis, I really do want to say that this is the best public spirit, the best tradition of Australian civic engagement, that you really are wonderful people, and my thanks go out to each and every one of you here today. Thank you. To Andrea, who's been our campaign manager, thank you so much. To Alan, my electorate chairman, Alan Cullen, thank you so much. Alan Friedman, who's worked so hard. To my staff in the electorate office, Lou and Athene and Ali and Mel. To my ministerial staff, led by Phil Gaetjens, who's overcome really significant setbacks this year, and I won't name you all. You've been wonderful, wonderful people to work with and to have on our campaign, and I want to thank you most sincerely. I also want to thank my two beautiful children who are here tonight, Phoebe and Sebastian. Madeline, our daughter, who is overseas, and somebody who has been a wonderful partner with me through this political episode and has been a fabulous wife and a fabulous mother, and my greatest friend, Tony. Friends, it's not my role to give a rundown on the national situation. I won't be doing that. That is for the party leaders to do. Suffice to say, it appears on a national basis as if there's been a swing of the order of 5%. It appears that as a consequence of that, that Labor has won significant seats throughout the country and may well have even won one or two seats here in Victoria. The consequence of that will be known to you. It will lead to a change of government. I think that's pretty clear. And I won't be doing any analysis tonight in relation to that. You will have speeches from each of the party leaders in due course, and they will do their analysis. What I intend to do is I intend to speak to my colleagues. I've spoken to a number of them already, to speak to them about their futures. I want to pay tribute to those members who have lost their seats. I want to say each and every one of you was a valuable member of the Liberal national team. I want to congratulate every one of my colleagues that has retained his or her seat. They are a fine group of people. I've always believed that the highest form of service in any society is public service, and those people who devote themselves to serving the public, not always with all of the genuine thanks that they deserve, are wonderful people, and I want to say to each and every one of my colleagues throughout Australia, Liberal and National, you're a fine group of people, and it's been a privilege to serve with you. I want to say to the people of Higgins, it has been my great honour to represent you in the federal parliament. You have done me the great honour of re-electing me, and I intend to represent you to the fullest of my ability. In relation to what happens in relation to the Liberal Party, I want to say the Liberal Party, I believe, is the party which best represents the entrepreneurial spirit, the belief in individual rights and dignity. It represents the aspirations of millions of people throughout Australia, and I think the Liberal Party will be very, very proud of what it has achieved in government over these last 11 and a half years. So, friends, we'll do our analysis overnight. I will have some more to say about the party and about political matters. I'll have some more to say about an analysis of the strengths and the opportunities that lie in front of us. I want to say this. I want to say two things about our country. The first is I want to reiterate what I said at our campaign launch. I believe that our ambitions for our country should be as large as the country itself. As I flew from Brisbane to Perth after our launch and I saw our country, a continent, an island, broad and vast and expansive, I thought to myself, I want a country with ambitions as big as the continent itself. And I honestly believe in the future there is so much more that we as Australians can do. I also want people to understand that the best years of our country lie in front of it. We're leaving the next leader of the Liberal Party to join the last leader of the Liberal Party. He's Prime Minister, but about to concede. This is the John Howard who came into Parliament 33 years ago. His wife Jeanette beside him then, beside him now. She's obviously been a stalwart of the Prime Ministers through all of that time. He's watched his margin and his own seat dwindle as the nature of his seat has changed. But in this period, he's led Australia for more than 11 and a half years, nearly 12 years, the second longest serving Prime Minister in Australian history after Sir Robert Menzies. This was going to be his fifth term if he made it. The polls told us all the way through this year that he was battling uphill against a new leader, a younger leader in Kevin Rudd. But one thing that you could never say about John Howard, he never takes a backward step, and he certainly hasn't taken a backward step this year. And even in the last week of the campaign, there was a lot of speculation that the coalition was coming back. This was a man who was still fighting right up until the votes were being cast around Australia.
My fellow Australians, a few moments ago I telephoned Mr Kevin Rudd and I congratulated him and the Australian Labor Party on a very emphatic victory. Now, this is a great democracy, and I want to wish Mr Rudd well. He assumes the mantle of the 26th Prime Minister of Australia. And I want to say there is no prouder job in the world that anybody can occupy than being the Prime Minister of this country. I wish him well in the task that he will undertake. And I want to say on behalf of the coalition that has governed this country for the last 11 and a half years, that we bequeath to him a nation that is stronger and prouder. A nation that is stronger and prouder and more prosperous than it was 11 and a half years ago. And can I say to all of you that it has been an immense privilege every day of my life over the last 11 and a half years to have been the Prime Minister of this beautiful country. And I want to thank... I want to thank the Australian people for the privilege that they have given me over that period of time. I respect it and I honour it, and it's something that has really been the most unbelievable experience. The Australian people are the greatest people on earth, and this is the greatest country on the earth. I've led a government that has taken this country from deep debt to strong prosperity. I've led a government that has never shirked the difficult decisions. I've led a government that has reformed the Australian economy and left it the envy of the world. I want to extend to a number of people my deep gratitude. I want to thank all of my parliamentary colleagues for their loyalty and their dedication over these long years in government. I want particularly to thank Mark Vaile and his two predecessors, John Anderson and Tim Fischer, both of whom served as Deputy Prime Ministers, to my own Deputy and Treasurer Peter Costello. I owe a very special debt. I owe a very special debt of gratitude. He's been a wonderful steward of the Australian economy, and the future of our party is very much tied up with Peter Costello. He is very much our future. And I want to say to those of my colleagues who have fallen in electoral battle today, to those of my colleagues who've lost their seats today, I thank them. I grieve for some of those young members who've been in Parliament for only a short period of time, some of those wonderful people who won in 2004, and also for some of my ministers who've done such a wonderful job. I particularly grieve the loss of Mal Brough, who led the intervention in the Northern Territory, which represented an absolute watershed in Indigenous policy in this country. And I hope that the new government of this country maintains that intervention to the full, because it's very important to the long-term benefit of the first Australians. This is not the time to reflect in detail on everything that's happened over the last 11 and a half years, except for me to say again what I said a few moments ago. I leave office as Prime Minister of Australia with our nation prouder and stronger and more prosperous than it has been. Can I also say this? Okay, please. Can I also express my thanks? Please. Yeah, just please. I'm very grateful for your expression of support, but I'm trying. I just want to address a few more remarks. I want to thank the Liberal Party organisation. I want to thank Brian Loughnane, the Federal Director, and the State Directors of the party all around Australia, and Chris McDivitt, the Federal President. I also want to say this, that I accept full responsibility for the Liberal Party campaign, and I therefore accept full responsibility for the Coalition's defeat in this election campaign. The only other thing that I want to say, that the Liberal Party, of course, will need to choose a new leader. And I wish that person, whoever it is, and I've indicated very clearly from my earlier remarks who I believe it should be. I believe the future of our party does lie very much with people, with Peter Costello and others who will come in behind him. The Liberal Party will have a process of rebuilding to undertake. But can I say to all of you, as I conclude my remarks and at the end of my political career, can I say to you that I owe more to the Liberal Party than the Liberal Party owes to me. The Liberal Party, please, the Liberal Party has been unbelievably generous and loyal and forgiving and understanding to me over the 33 years that I've been in Parliament, the 15 or more years that I have led it, and the 11 and a half years that I have been Prime Minister. And I will love the Liberal Party for the rest of my life, and I will always feel greatly in debt to the party that has meant so much to me. And finally, I want to express my gratitude, my love and my thanks to the members of my family. But before singling them out, can I also say how much I have appreciated the support and loyalty of my personal staff, many of whom are here tonight. Tony Nutt, my Chief of Staff, my Personal Secretary, Suzanne Kasperzak, and the members of my press staff who've sort of adorned those early morning walks, and to all my other advisors and helpers and wonderful people who've put up with a sometimes cantankerous leader and Prime Minister over the past few months. It has not been easy, and I want to thank all of them very warmly for the support that they have given me. And finally, I want to thank the members of my family, my wonderful children, Melanie, who can't be here tonight because she's bridesmaid in the wedding of her best friend. I mean, she told me I'd chosen the election on the wrong day, but and it appears that she's right. But she and my wonderful grandson Angus handed me my How to Vote card at Ermington Public School today. But to my two wonderful sons, Tim, and lovely to have his girlfriend Sarah on the stage with us tonight, and Richard, who's come back from America for the last week of the campaign. I just express publicly to them my pride and my love for them and for everything they mean to me and to my life. And finally, to the wonderful person beside me, Jeanette. She's not only been the love of my life, but she's been my rock and my advisor and my life's companion for 36 years and through all of my political ups and downs.
Does this have been, Vic?
Yes, it has been. No, it continues to be, yes. I belong to a family of debaters. We keep correcting ourselves, but ladies and gentlemen, I owe everything that I have achieved in these recent years to a wonderful, strong family. And Janetta's been the cement. Janetta's been there all the time, and she's had to put up with a lot. And I just want to publicly say to her how much I not only love her, but how much I am in her debt for all the support and counsel that she's given to me. And my friends, although it is still officially in doubt, it is very likely to be the case that I will no longer be the member for Bennelong. But whatever ultimately is the situation, I do want to thank the people of Bennelong who've done me the honour of electing me to represent them in the National Parliament for some 33 years. And I do want to thank them very warmly. Lastly, can I say to all of the people of Australia that it has been a tremendous honour, opportunity and privilege to have served you. Public service is the greatest form of service that can come one's way in life, and I've had great privileges. Naturally, I'm saddened by the defeat of the Coalition tonight, but I count myself very fortunate to have been the beneficiary of the support of the people of Australia for so long. I thank them. I wish this nation well. I believe very profoundly that Australia's best years lie ahead of her, and I wish the government elected by the people today the very best of good fortune in the years ahead. Thank you.
Okay, and as John Howard prepares to leave the stage, at the end of his time in government, at the end of his time as leader of the Liberal Party, it remains to be seen whether it will be the end of his time as the member for Bennelong, because tonight, with 77% of the vote counted, Bennelong, Maxine McHugh for Labor is ahead in Bennelong on the primary vote. She's something like 570 votes ahead on the primary vote, and in two-party preferred terms on our calculations, 5.2%. There's a 5.2% swing to Maxine McHugh in Bennelong. As Nick Minchin has said a number of times tonight, the postal votes in Bennelong will play a big part there. But essentially, if John Howard does retain his seat of Bennelong tonight, the big question mark then is how long will he stay in the Parliament? Nick Minchin?
Well, I noticed the Prime Minister say that he wasn't sure that he would win the seat. I don't think if he does win it that anyone would expect him actually to remain. I don't think the people of Bennelong would expect him to remain. The dignified thing would be for him to retire, and I hope he, frankly, has the opportunity to retire from the seat rather than be beaten. I would prefer that to occur. And I say that was a great speech from a remarkable man. I think the particular things I'd point out were the fact that the Prime Minister accepted full responsibility for the campaign, which is a magnificent act on his part and for our defeat, and that he totally and unconditionally endorsed Peter Costello as our next leader, which I think also was absolutely the right thing to do, and I look forward to Peter Costello becoming our leader unopposed.
I was a little bit puzzled, Peter Costello, in that whole time that we had him up, and he did continue talking after we left him, but for John Howard, but up to that point he hadn't mentioned Mr Howard.
Well, he made the point that he was preceding the two leaders. He didn't want to preempt them in any way. I'm sure he'll have something to say, but I thought it was appropriate for him not to preempt either John Howard or Kevin Rudd and leave it for them. But I don't think you should read too much into that, Kevin.
No, it was a moment of curiosity, Nick.
Okay.
Julia Gillard, what do you reckon's going through Kevin Rudd's mind now? I suspect it's ticking off the priorities for his first week in office.
I'm sure Kevin is going to hit the ground running. He's someone who works unbelievably hard. I think he's going to take a very measured approach, but we're going to start to see some of the policies delivered, some of the things that we promised during the campaign, the ratification of Kyoto, promises to get health and education services improved. Obviously, some of our promises on climate change when the Parliament resumes next year. We'll be presenting a bill on industrial relations. Kevin's someone who is just going to put one foot in front of the other, but he will put them in front of each other very quickly. He's someone who will absolutely hit the ground running. It'll be to work tomorrow for all of us.
Nick Minchin may be grimacing here as we go through this, but how much work have you done on the draft legislation that you will introduce to make your changes to work choices?
Well, we've got very clear policy, Kerry, so obviously when you've got very clear policy, it's easier to turn it into legislation. We've always said that we would have a transition bill first to end the making of Australian workplace agreements, and we will do that as quickly as it can be humanly done.
But of course you will still have a Senate until July, which the government which the coalition controls.
Yes, we will, and I suspect that there will be some moments of reflection by coalition senators about what this means. I would say we've got a very clear mandate for our industrial relations changes and indeed for the rest of our program. I mean, even the Prime Minister described this as an emphatic victory for Labor. For us now, of course, it's about delivering the promises that we made to the Australian community. We always understood that in asking the Australian community for their trust, we were asking them for a very big thing. We want to make sure that this nation has a better future. I'd agree with the Prime Minister. I think the best days of this nation do lie ahead of it, and I hope we can make some substantial strides towards those days by delivering on the promises that we've made. Industrial relations certainly, but very importantly, education. It's about Australian kids, it's about our future prosperity, health, climate change, infrastructure. These things have all been at the core of the campaign.
Okay, Nick Minchin, you are still the Senate leader for the coalition, and does Labor have a mandate to change work choices? It was right at the heart of their whole campaign, wasn't it?
Can I just say the question of Senate leadership, of course, will now be a matter for my colleagues. I will offer my services, but it will, in opposition, we elect our Senate leader. I think it's a little rich for Juliet to claim the mandate argument, given that if any government had had a mandate for the sale of Telstra, for the introduction of the goods and services tax, it was our government when we took it to elections and won elections with those policies. That didn't seem to affect the Labor Party's attitude in the Senate, where they voted time and time again against those policies. Look, can I say, we will consider legislation on its merits. We are prepared to consult with and talk to the new Labor government about its legislation, to be constructive, but at the end of the day, we will do things that are what we believe in the nation's interests. We will have difficulty voting for things that we believe will cost jobs or damage small businesses in this country, but we're prepared to discuss with and consult with the government, the new government, on its legislation.
But I suppose lucky our IR policy will do neither.
I see. Well, we'll wait and see, Julie. We'll assess that when we see it.
But of course, yes, we'll maybe have a look at the Senate figures a little bit later. But of course, you may well not have the balance of power anyway after July. But
it's looking like we might have 37, and that Steve Fielding and Nick Xenophon are actually going to have the balance of power after June 30.
Oh well.
So the Senate will remain a fascinating place.
Liberal preferences could well elect a Green in South Australia at this stage. So if the Greens have got the balance of power, you've probably only got yourself a plate.
Okay, thanks for letting me.
Hello.
Okay, we might now hear from Tony Jones with his panel of Mitch Fifield and Stephen Smith.
Well, Mitch Fifield, I'll start with you because we just heard the two concession speeches back to back, and I just personal question first: how are you feeling?
A little flat, but also there's a new sense of responsibility when a new government is formed, a new opposition is formed, and what that means is that the coalition is now in the accountability business. It's our job to hold the new government to account, to make sure that they go in the best interest of the Australian people, and that in itself is a significant responsibility. So I guess, although flat, I'm feeling a new but different sense of responsibility.
The Prime Minister, former Prime Minister, I'm not really sure exactly how we refer to John Howard now, he actually said he didn't believe that he was likely to retain Bennelong, so that changes things immediately if that is the case. What do you think will happen over the next week? I mean, will the party simply wait to find out what the result is?
Well, Bennelong is a seat, obviously, we want to win. We're in the business of having as many seats as we possibly can in the Parliament. Whether the Prime Minister holds his seat or not, we still have a job to do this week to examine what's happened, to look at what the priorities should be for us as an opposition and to pick our new leadership team.
Yes, how quickly do you think there'll be a transfer of leadership?
Well, these things, I guess, we've got to wait for the results in a few seats to give colleagues the opportunity to have their say, but it would be over the next week or two.
What would you suspect will happen, Mitch Fifield? I mean, do you think there'll be a spill in which a number of people come forward? Will there be a consensus?
Well, leadership positions are automatically declared vacant after each election. That's the usual procedure. What will happen, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, as I said before, whatever Peter Costello wants to do, the party will back him. I have absolutely no doubt about that. But we'll have to wait to hear from Peter after he's consulted with his colleagues to see what he thinks.
Stephen Smith, your reflections on listening to, well, it's been a very long time in coming, that concession speech from John Howard. Well, 11 years, a number of elections down the track. I mean, how did it feel for you listening to what is the end of a political era?
Well, firstly, I feel for Mitch. I mean, I don't think election nights or generally is a time for sticking the boot into your opponents. I thought Peter Costello and John Howard conducted themselves, with great dignity. John Howard is entitled to, from his perspective, however we might disagree with a whole range of things, he's entitled from his perspective to stand back and say, this was, the decade of the Howard government and the Howard period, and these are the changes that I made that I'm proud of. I actually think that, and my colleagues will hate me for saying this, and Mitch probably as well, a certain period in opposition is actually good for you. You are forced to go out, get a framework in your head, understand how your nation works and what its people feels and thinks, and to then try and do good works in office. And I think that the challenge now, and I think we only won the election because, in the end, Kevin Rudd and Labor was able to persuade the Australian community that we would be a safe pair of hands, but strike out for some of the challenges of the future. Climate change, education, broadband. And so I think Labor has always got a great mission in office. It's at two levels. One is to make the lives of ordinary working families and people under financial pressure, make that better, to uplift the lives of working families, but also to uplift the spirit of the nation, to show that there are things that we can do either as individuals or as a nation that uplift the spirit. And that's always a challenge for us, and often there's a conflict between those things. But just as now, Mitch and his colleagues have now got the job of saying, well, we're in opposition, the primary role we have now is to hold the government to account. So we have to be a good government. I'm very confident that Kevin wants to hit the ground running and will do so. And we'll judge, at the next election, we will be judged on how well we do and how we perform and how we meet our commitments and how we do strike out for those challenges to the future. So in that respect, the weights are on us. We'll obviously take plenty of joy out of tonight because it has been a long time between drinks. But then pretty quickly we've just got to get on and do it and discharge those obligations.
Very, very quickly indeed, and I'm going to have to wrap you up there, both of you. For now, I'm not sure if we'll be coming back to you because we're still waiting to see when Kevin Rudd appears. But
our call was right. Our call was right.
You got it right from the beginning.
Stephen was the first to call it.
Well, is that true? We'll have to.
Absolutely.
We'll actually have to go.
We're on the ABC. Of course, we were the first.
Congratulations, Stephen. You called it first. Okay, Kerry, back to you.
Thanks, Tony. And while we're waiting for Kevin Rudd to appear, I believe Anna Bligh, the Queensland Premier, is going to be introducing him. But we're going to keep going with some figures, give you the overview, tell the story of the night, really, in a few words. The national swing, with 75% of the vote counted, the two-party preferred numbers have slipped back slightly for Labor from 53 to 52.9, 47.1 for the Liberal Party, which represents a swing to Labor in two-party preferred terms of 5.6%. If we have a look at how that plays out in our scoreboard graphic in terms of seats, the Liberal Party primary votes come up very slightly, 36.5%. They've won 48 seats, they've lost 21. The Nats, 5.5%, won 10 seats, lost 3. The Labor Party, 43.5% primary vote. We're giving them 83 seats, which is a gain of 24. We might take a look at the chamber, Anthony, and the first graphic would show the seats that we're saying have been won by Labor.
Yeah, the first seats are those numbers we're showing there, which was 48 for the Liberals, 10 for the Nationals, 83 for Labor. When we factor in, we've got a couple more likelies. I think we've got one more page that gives one more seat to the Liberals. And then we have our prediction at this stage for the end of the night. We're predicting that the Labor Party will end up with 86 seats, which is a majority of 22 in the new Parliament.
And Kevin Rudd is going to be on stage at any moment. We'll keep pushing along. Anthony, with the changing seats.
Let's look at the changing seats. We've got many of these. Labor's gained Bass. They've gained Bennelong, more than likely. Blair, the Labor Party, a 10% swing. Bonner, 5% gain. Bowman's in doubt with a big 8.9% swing. Labor's gained Braddon. They've gained Corangamite, which we haven't looked at much tonight. The Liberals appear to have gained Cowan.
Okay, Anthony, and we'll pause it there because Queensland Premier Anna Bligh is walking up to the stage now to introduce a triumphant Kevin Rudd, who's about to be the new Prime Minister of Australia.
Tonight is a great night for Australia. Our country has decided to have a new government. It will be led by someone who promised us new leadership and he's delivered. Someone who has offered us a future. Friends, the Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd.
Kevin Rudd has been in the Parliament a mere 9 years. He came into the Parliament for the seat of Griffith in Brisbane in 1998. He contested it in 96 for the first time. Was not able to make it into the Parliament that year. That was definitely John Howard's year. Here he is now, 11 years after that first attempt to get into the Parliament, Prime Minister-elect of Australia, recording one of Labor's greatest victories in its history.
Okay, guys. A short time ago, Mr. Howard called me to offer his congratulations. I thanked him for that and the dignity with which he extended those congratulations. We should celebrate and honour the way in which we conduct this great Australian democracy of ours. And it's been on display again tonight. I want to acknowledge now for the entire Australian nation and publicly recognise Mr Howard's extensive contribution to public service in Australia. There are big differences between us, but we share a common pride in this great nation of ours, Australia. And I want to wish Mr and Mrs Howard and their family all the very best for the future. Today, Australia has looked to the future. Today, the Australian people have decided that we as a nation will move forward. To plan for the future, to prepare for the future, to embrace the future, and together, as Australians, to unite and write a new page in our nation's history. To make this great country of ours, Australia, even greater. Today, many people across Australia have voted Labor for the very first time. Today, many people across Australia have voted Labor for the first time in a long, long time. And I want to thank all those people in Australia who have placed their trust in me and my team. And I say tonight to the nation, I will never take their sacred trust for granted. I understand that this is a great privilege, and I will do everything to honour the trust which has been extended to me. I also understand there is a great responsibility involved in national leadership, and I stand ready to accept that responsibility. I am determined to honour the confidence which has been extended to us by the people of our great land. And I say to all of those who have voted for us today, I say to each and every one of them that I will be a Prime Minister for all Australians. A Prime Minister for Indigenous Australians. Australians who have been born here and Australians who have come here from afar and have contributed to the great diversity that is our nation, Australia. A Prime Minister for our cities and our towns, a Prime Minister for rural Australia, which right now is experiencing the worst drought our country has known. For our men and women in uniform serving in difficult and dangerous environments around the world, for all our states and territories of this great nation and Commonwealth of ours, I will be Prime Minister for all Australians. And I make this solemn pledge to the nation: I will always govern in the national interest. And my door will always be open to men and women of goodwill who want to participate in making our country even greater in the future. Friends, tomorrow the work begins. Australia's long-term challenges demand a new consensus across our country. I'm determined to use the office of Prime Minister to forge that consensus. It is necessary for us to embrace the future as a nation united, forged with a common vision. I want to put aside the old battles of the past, the old battles between business and unions, the old battles between growth and the environment, the old and tired battles between federal and state, the old battles between public and private. It's time for a new page to be written in our nation's history. The future is too important for us not to work together to embrace the challenges of the future and to carve out our nation's destiny. We have put before the Australian people a plan. It's our agenda for work. And you know something? Everything I have said through this election campaign and in the year leading up to it is our agenda for work. To start building a world-class education system. To embrace the long-term funding needs of our public hospital system. To act and act with urgency on the great challenges of climate change and water. To build a 21st century infrastructure for a 21st century economy. And to get the balance right between fairness and flexibility in the workplaces of a nation. And to ensure by that and by other practical assistance to working families in Australia that the great Australian fair go has a future and not just a past. And through all this, to make sure we keep our economy strong, but make sure it delivers for working families as well. And this task as well, to remain ever vigilant in the defence of our nation's national security. The task ahead will not be an easy one. I understand that, I grasp that. But this government that I will lead will work with energy and determination and vigour and with fresh ideas to embrace each of these challenges and to prosecute this agenda for work for the nation. I also say this on this national occasion to our friends and allies around the world, that I look forward as the next Prime Minister of Australia to working with them in dealing with the great challenges which our world now faces. I extend our greetings tonight to our great friend and ally, the United States, to our great friends and partners across Asia and the Pacific, and to our great friends and partners in Europe and beyond. We look forward to working in partnership with all those nations. And now to say some thank yous. I begin by thanking the people of Brisbane's South Side. Who have done me the great honour again of returning me as their Member of Parliament, the member for Griffith. My local community is the rock upon which all other things are built, and I thank them again for the trust they've extended to me. I also want to thank the great Australian Labor Party. This party that I joined 25 years ago, this party which embraces the great mission of how we can build prosperity for our nation without ever throwing the fair go out the back door. I want to thank the members and supporters of our party for the work they have put in right across this nation today. Each and every one of them, each of those volunteers, every electorate contest across the breadth of Australia, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. For you have kept the faith in good times and in bad, and I honour your contribution, your patience, your perseverance, and the blood, sweat and tears you've dedicated to this election victory today. I also want to make special mention tonight of Bernie Banton. Bernie, a fighter for the victims of asbestos, who is gravely ill in hospital in Sydney tonight. I say to Bernie, if he is watching this broadcast, mate, you're not going to be forgotten in this place. The values for which you have stood and fought, and the fact that you have been supported in your fight by the great Australian trade union movement, when so many others were prepared to simply cast you to one side, Bernie, you stand out as a beacon and clarion call to us all about what is decent and necessary in life. And mate, I salute you. I want to thank my deputy, Julia Gillard. And Julia, I know you're not in Queensland tonight, but you got a fantastic reception from a Queensland audience. She has been fantastic as the Deputy Leader of the Australian Labor Party. She'll be fantastic as the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia. I want to thank all my shadow ministers, led by Wayne Swan here in Queensland. You can take the boys out of Nambour, but you can't take Nambour out of the boys. I would like to thank also all members of my parliamentary team across Australia and all those candidates who have gone out there and held high the flag of our party on this election day 07. I thank them one and all. To our party president, John Faulkner, who has been with me throughout this campaign, and whose job on Senate estimates will be of a different type now. To the national campaign team led by our fantastic National Secretary, Tim Gartrell. And to my great friend in New South Wales, Mark Arbib, and the great support right across the machinery of our party to deliver this election outcome today, I thank you one and all. To my staff, my fantastic staff, I think you are just remarkable. The work you have done, the blood, sweat and tears that have been poured out, I just couldn't ask for better from any of you. Thank you one and all. To David Epstein, my Chief of Staff, thanks David. To Alistair Jordan, my Deputy Chief of Staff. Thank you, Alistair. He's had to put up with me for 5 years. Gina Tilley and Nev Conway from my electorate office. And they are a fantastic local team, and I thank them one and all. I would also want tonight to thank my life partner, Therese. I joined this party 25 years ago. We were married 26 years ago. She has been an extraordinary support to me. And you know something? Therese has had a tough year as well. And I cannot speak more highly of the great support and the great love and encouragement she's extended to me in this political career upon which I've embarked. Darling, I really appreciate it. To each of my wonderful kids, Marcus, to Nicholas, to Jessica and her husband Albert, I just say, this family means everything to me. I also honour my wider family, my brothers Malcolm and Greg, and my sister Lorraine, who have been great supports for me for a long period of time. And tonight I would also honour the memory of my mum and dad. Dad died nearly 40 years ago. He'd be surprised about tonight. Particularly as he was in the country party. And Mum, who died the day before the last election, I honour their memory and I salute the values they delivered to this, their son. Because you know something? Without family, we are nothing. Friends, history has given our generation the opportunity to shape a new future for this nation of ours, Australia. Let us be the generation that seizes the opportunities of today to invest in the Australia of tomorrow. That's the mission statement we have as the next government of this country. But I want to do it by us all working together as one. Tomorrow, and I say this to the team, we roll up our sleeves. We're ready for hard work. We're ready for the long haul. You can have a strong cup of tea if you want in the meantime. Even a nice Vovo on the way through. But the celebration should stop there. We have a job of work to do. It's time, friends, for us together as a nation to bind together to write this new page in our great nation's history. I thank the nation.
Okay, so that speech from Kevin Rudd, Prime Minister-elect of Australia, as I said before, only been in the Parliament 9 years, only been leader for less than a year, a remarkable path through that year. Virtually from the moment he arrived in the leadership, he had opinion polls consistently, week after week, month after month, putting Labor in a very strong position around the country, and so it has proved. What's happened in the end, Nick Minchin and Julia Gillard, is that Labor has gained 10 seats in Queensland, 7 seats in New South Wales. You've won government in those 2 states alone, 2 in Victoria, 2 in Tasmania, 3 in South Australia, possibly Solomon in the Territory as well. Julia Gillard, you got your running shoes on?
I have got my running shoes on, and Kevin's serious. It will be to work tomorrow. I can feel it. So we will hit the ground running.
So you'll fly to Brisbane?
I'll certainly be joining Kevin, yes, and we'll be working away. Can I say, Kerry, it's just been my absolute privilege to work with Kevin in this campaign. It's just a tremendous honour to be with him as his deputy. This is obviously an important night, hopefully in the nation's story too, as we move towards implementing our plans for the future. And if you just indulge me one moment, Kerry, I'd obviously like to thank my family, to thank my partner Tim, who's waiting for me, my sister Alison, my mother and father, who were watching in South Australia. My father campaigned with Nicole Corns today, so he'll be a little bit sad about that, but I think happy about everything else. To my niece and nephew, Jenna and Tom, and to my staff, my Chief of Staff, Ben, Kimberly Gardner, Rhonda Wright-Velt, Silvana, Sarah, Jackie, Rachel. They've just all been amazing, and I'd like to thank them for everything they've done. Kimberly and Rhonda have been on the road with me for a very long period of time.
Julia, just looking back over Labor's years in opposition, you had your leadership problems, Kim Beazley through 2 elections, then Simon Crean, who didn't actually get to an election, then Mark Latham, then back to Kim Beazley. But suddenly it's all coalesced behind Kevin, and there were maybe 5 or 6 people who had leadership aspirations. The party seemed to be in a real kind of almost crippled, really, and then suddenly in less than a year it's all coalesced around Kevin Rudd.
And Kevin's led from the front. It's certainly been his agenda, and it's his agenda for the nation's future. We've obviously had our trials and tribulations in opposition. Opposition's difficult days, and Labor's experienced some of those, but I do think we went out and listened to the community, and we put together an agenda for change, and Kevin's just done a remarkable job in the less than 12 months he's been leader, and a remarkable job during the campaign. Just unbelievably sure-footed. No one could outwork him. He's just, amazing, and intellectual grasp, touch with the Australian community. You couldn't possibly ask for better.
Nick Minchin, before you go and put the boxing gloves on again tomorrow, some quiet reflections, if you like, about the Kevin Rudd that you've witnessed and the transition of Kevin Rudd from opposition frontbencher to leader and now Prime Minister-elect.
Well, can I first thank him for his very gracious remarks about John Howard. That was dignified and appropriate and welcome. I join with John Howard in congratulating Kevin Rudd and Julia and their team on a remarkable victory. And for the sake of Australia, I hope they are a good government. We will be a robust and constructive opposition, and we will be working hard now to win the 12 seats, I think it is, that we need to get back into government next time with a 2 or 3% swing. So I think the new government will know they've got a very experienced and capable opposition, and as I trust, led by Peter Costello, who I think will actually be an extraordinarily good and effective leader of the opposition, that will keep this new government honest. I'll be particularly keen to ensure that Mr Rudd lives up to his new claim to be an economic conservative, being one myself. I'll be very keen to see him, in fact, put that into practice.
He might surprise you.
And I'm sure the left wing of his own party will be very interested in that too. But look, you've got to hand it to Kevin. It's been extraordinary performance to come from only 9 years in the Parliament. He does have a formidable intellect. He's a very bright guy. I just hope that he can lead this nation constructively and well, and that he lives up to the sort of obligations that he's laid out for himself tonight. But I do want to assure him that he will have a tough opposition opposite him, keeping him honest.
And now here you are, you're facing a nation wall-to-wall Labor governments, and the only other time, as I understand it in Australian history, that this happened was for about 10 or 11 months in 1969. They were all Liberal governments, and that will take its course this time around too. But Julia Gillard, Commonwealth-state relations and reforms in that area very much at the heart of what Kevin Rudd has promised. One assumes that it will be easier with Labor governments, but not necessarily so.
Well, we've got a big agenda there. I mean, we want to end the blame game in health, and I think we've been realistic about that. We've said we want to work cooperatively with our state counterparts, but Kevin, of course, is standing ready to make sure that his reform agenda is implemented. So we want to end forever the cycle where you see state politicians blaming federal politicians who blame state politicians. Education is another area that requires Commonwealth state reform to make sure we've got quality from our smallest kids in preschool all the way through our schooling system, trades into universities.
Okay, well, it's been a long night and a fascinating one, because there was no very clear picture early on, and some of those early results then changed, so lots of swirls and eddies, but there's no denying the broader picture. A swing to Labor of something in the order of about 5.6, 5.7%, translating quite probably into a majority of around 22 seats. Julia Gillard and Nick Minchin, thank you both very much for your very substantial contribution tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry.
Thank you very much. Congratulations on your show.
And also our thanks to Tony Jones's panel of Stephen Smith, Mitch Fifield, earlier Peter McGoran and others. And we're now actually going to ask Tony and Anthony Green to take you through the call of the board.
Yeah, I am.
And we'll start, in fact, with... Well, I'm just waiting to see what we're going to start with. Okay, we're going to start with Tasmania. And the swing of 2.5%. 56.6 to the ALP, 43.4 the Liberal National Party. And let's have a look at the seats, shall we, Anthony?
Once we got Julia out of the way, the crowd's gone quiet.
Yeah.
So there's been a swing of 2%, 4%. A swing of 4% to the Labor Party in Bass, which is so a swing of 4% in Bass at this stage, and there's a thankfully they've gone quiet. Swing of 4%, which has delivered the seat to Jodie Campbell of the Labor Party. So it's a gain for the Labor Party there. And in Braddon, the other seat, Sid Sidebottoms, returned to the Parliament, defeating Mark Baker for the Liberal Party. So those two seats in Tasmania have gone back to the Labor Party after being lost last time. And then in Denison, we have Duncan Kerr easily returned. He's had a bit of a loss of primary vote support, but overall a 2.6% swing to the Labor Party, and has retained that seat. Franklin is one of only 4 seats in the country that's recorded a swing to the Liberal Party. This was where Harry Quick resigned and retired and was left the Labor Party. Julie Collins is a new Labor member for Franklin, replacing Harry Quick. And the final seat is Lyons, which we haven't had a look at tonight, but there was a 5.5% swing to Labor. Dick Adams easily back. Ben Quinn running fourth there was the originally endorsed Liberal candidate who left over the decision to approve the Guns paper mill. And if we have a look at the two ACT seats at this stage, we've got Canberra. Annette Ellis has been easily returned with a 1.6% swing to her back in Parliament, and Bob McMullen in the other Canberra seat, Fraser, where he's been returned with he's got 51.8 and a swing of 1.8% to him.
Okay, Anthony, I'm back with you now, wired up and ready to go. We're just waiting now for the next of our states.
In Victoria, we've got some category. We have a look at our swing figure. The swing in Victoria is 5.2%, but this wasn't quite big enough to take a flood of seats. So 5.2% is the swing. But there's only 2 seats change hands in the end, but there's a few seats left in doubt at the end of the night. The first seat is Aston.
Okay, let's have a look at Aston, shall we?
And Chris Pearce has been easily returned. He's got a swing of 8.4% against him, so this seat's gone back to where it's more marginal position over time.
And the second seat in Victoria is Ballarat.
And Catherine King's been easily returned a 6% swing, and Labor increased their majority substantially.
Then we go to Batman.
And Martin Ferguson, former ACTU president, easily returned with a 4.5% swing.
And Bendigo?
Bendigo, there was talk that Labor could lose this seat at one stage, but there was a swing of 5% to Steve Gibbons, and he's been easily returned as a Member of Parliament.
And Bruce, I'm still getting a bit of byplay in the background there, but Bruce in Melbourne's eastern suburbs.
4.5% swing, and Alan Griffin's back in the Parliament.
Corwell, it's Melbourne outer northwest fringe.
Yes, Maria Van Vakanu, who's the Labor member for Corwell, a substantial 11% swing in that seat. That's a recovery of a huge swing against Labor at the last election.
And now Casey in Melbourne's outer eastern suburbs.
Tony Smith, former senior aide to Peter Costello. He's held that seat for a number of years. He's gone to preferences. He's been held the seat with a 5.9% swing. Dimtner Beard is a former state MP for the Labor Party in that district.
Chisholm now in Melbourne's eastern suburbs.
Well, it's for the first time in many years it's not marginal. Anna Burke has a 4.7% swing to her, now holds it at a margin of 7.4%.
Here's one that changed, Corangamite in the southern Victoria and Geelong.
Stuart MacArthur's leading on the primary votes but will be defeated on preferences. There's been a 6.6% swing, and Darren Cheeseman is the new member for Corangamite. I think he's the first Labor member for Corangamite since Jim Scullin before the First World War, from memory.
Now Corio.
This is where Gavin O'Connor finished third with 12.6%. Richard Miles is the new Labor candidate for Corio, having won endorsement when Gavin O'Connor lost Labor endorsement.
And Deakin in Melbourne's eastern suburbs.
This is the other seat that fell after many, many years. For only the second time in 60 years, Labor has gained Deakin. Mike Simon, an ETU official, is behind on the primaries, wins on preferences, so Labor gains Deakin.
Dunkley in Melbourne's outer southeast.
Well, it's a 6.5% swing, but still he's retained by Bruce Bilson, who's currently the Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Flinders in Melbourne's southeast rural fringe.
Peter Reith's old seat, there's been a 2.9% swing, but Greg Hunt has been comfortably returned in this seat.
Now Gellibrand in Melbourne's western suburbs.
Nicola Roxon, having won a debate against absent Tony Abbott in a health debate. She's easily won this seat. It's a very safe seat. Nicola Roxon's been elected. Dave O'Neill, the comedian, got 2.1% there, I noticed.
Gippsland in eastern Victoria.
Well, Peter McGoran's comfortably won. He's gone to preferences, but he'll still win that easily. He's had a 2% swing to the Labor Party in that seat.
Goldstein in Melbourne's inner southeast suburbs.
Minister for Vocational Education, a former Liberal Party National Secretary, Andrew Robb, has been returned, a 4% swing to the Labor Party.
Gorton in Melbourne's western suburbs.
Brendan O'Connor easily returned with a 5.5% swing. His margin's up above 20 in this very safe seat.
Higgins now in Melbourne's inner southeast.
A 2% swing against Peter Costello, but he's been easily returned in that seat.
Indeed, he has. And Holt in Melbourne's outer southeast suburbs.
Anthony Burns had a 10.7% swing. This was left marginal by the last election, but he's no longer marginal, as I said, a 10.5% swing.
Simon Crean's seat of Hotham.
Well, he's had a 5% swing, and he's got his margin up into double figures again, so Simon Crean is comfortably returned.
Indi in northeast Victoria.
She's Sophie Mirabella, formerly people may know her as Sophie Panopoulos, but she's got married, and Sophie Mirabella now she's been comfortably returned, otherwise a 7% swing to Labor.
Isaacs, it's in Melbourne's southeast suburbs.
Well, Mark Dreyfus has won this seat, elected, replacing Ann Corkin for the Labor Party. Barrister has got a 6% swing and is easily elected.
Jenny Macklin's seat of Jaga.
She's easily returned, 4.5% swing, and Jenny Macklin is back in the Parliament.
And Kooyong remains in traditional hands. It's in Melbourne's eastern suburbs.
Basically no swing in that seat, so Kooyong has been won by Petro Georgiou. It's a traditional Conservative seat.
OK, Latrobe now in Melbourne's outer eastern suburbs.
This remains in doubt at the end of the night, but it looks like Jason Wood has withheld the strong campaign from Rodney Cox. For the Labor Party, a 5.6% swing, but at the end of the night, the Liberals' Jason Wood is still ahead, and you'd expect he'd win on postal votes.
Lawler.
Well, Julia Gillard, 7% swing, and Julia Gillard is easily returned as a member for Lawler.
Mallee in northwest Victoria.
A 7% swing to Labor, but sorry, I've got the wrong seat there. Mallee, 3.5% swing. John Forrest easily returned as the member for Mallee.
Maribyrnong in Melbourne's western suburbs.
Maribyrnong's Bill Shorten, 58.1%, another unionist entering Parliament. A very high-profile unionist, replacing Secombe, the former member whose name I've momentarily forgotten, but it has been a long night, so I'm allowed to forget the occasional name.
It's been a very long
Bob
night.
Secombe, I think his name is it.
You're forgiven. McEwen in central Victoria.
Well, Fran Bailey has held on to this seat. Well, she's just likely held, 6.2% swing. She'll win that on postal and absent votes, but she's come very close to defeat in that seat.
Macmillan now in eastern Victoria.
This is a wonderful story. Well, maybe not wonderful, but Russell Broadbent, he's run for Parliament 7 times. He's only ever won twice. This three times. This is the 4th time, and it's the first time he's ever been re-elected, because the 2 previous times he was elected, he lost his seat. So Russell Broadbent has been returned as a member for Macmillan.
Certainly seemed happy enough when we spoke to Melbourne, in Melbourne inner city.
Well, it's interesting here. The Greens have nearly outpolled the Liberals, and I think they may do after preferences, but Lindsay Tanner will be returned because he's got over 50% of the vote. So Lindsay Tanner, Adam Bant, who's the Green, is a well-known union lawyer running for the Greens, but certainly a very good result there for the Greens.
Melbourne Ports now.
Michael Danby returned with a 2.4% swing. Michael Danby defeating the Liberal Party's Adam Held.
OK, let's have a look at Menzies.
Kevin Andrews has had a 2.5% swing against him. Philip Nitschke, the euthanasia campaigner, 3.9% there, but Kevin Andrews doesn't even need to go to preferences.
Murray in northern Victoria.
Sharman Stone is, I think, the Minister for Workforce Participation. She's been easily returned in this very safe seat up on the Murray River, 6.2% swing to Labor.
Scullen, Melbourne's outer northern suburbs.
Harry Jenkins, son of a former Speaker. It'll be interesting to see if he becomes a Speaker himself now. But 70% margin for him. He's got a swing of 5.9%. Harry Jenkins back in Parliament.
Wannon in western Victoria.
Malcolm Fraser's old seat has seen a 4% swing to Labor. The current Speaker, David Hawker, has been easily returned.
Wills in Melbourne's northwest suburbs.
Kelvin Thompson has been re-elected with a 5.5% swing to the Labor Party. And now we move on to New South Wales.
On to New South Wales, and we ought to have a look at the percentage swing that occurred in New South Wales. If we can get that graphic.
And we've seen a swing of 5.9% in New South Wales. That the swing of 5.9% to the Labor Party. It's
here it comes, Anthony. So it's
a long night. Even the computer's tired.
This is 5.9% swing that's recording there, and 54% to the LP, 46 to the Liberal National Party.
And the first seat is Banks. The Labor Party has got a majority of the seats in New South Wales, so it continues the trend for the last 50 years that the party that wins the majority in New South Wales wins the majority of seats. The first seat is Banks. And Darryl Mellom has been run a couple of close races in recent years, but he's got a swing of nearly 8% to him, and Darryl Mellom has been easily returned with a substantially increased majority in the electorate of Banks.
OK, to Barton now in Sydney's southern suburbs, St George district.
Robert McClelland is Labor's foreign affairs spokesman, and he's easily returned with a 4.5% swing.
Now, here's one we all want to know the answer to. Anthony Bennelong in Sydney's North Shore.
And at the end of the night, the margin is... I've skipped a seat suddenly. I'll just get my figures back and I'll tell you exactly what the swing is. 5.3%. Labor is on 51.1. Labor is ahead on the primary votes. You would expect that Labor will go on to win that seat.
Except for the postal vote issue. What do you think about that?
I think that will make it close, but if John Howard wins that seat, it will be by the tiniest majority. And
he seemed to be conceding it himself tonight, didn't he?
I think it's a very hard margin to turn around that one.
All right, Berowra in Sydney's North Shore.
Philip Ruddock easily returned. He's had a 4.5% swing against him, but Philip Ruddock's back in the Parliament.
Blaxland in Sydney's southwestern suburbs.
Blaxland, Jason Clare replaces Michael Hatton, the former member for Blaxland. Jason Clare is a new Labor member in Paul Keating's former seat. He's got a swing of 3.2% towards him.
Brendan Nelson's seat in Bradford.
Bradfield is a very safe seat on the upper North Shore, and there's a 3.5% swing to Labor, but Brendan Nelson's easily returned.
And Killare in New South Wales Central West.
This one's slightly complex. This is where Peter Andren died, unfortunately. John Cobb is the member for Parkes, which is much of the new seat of Killare. He chose to contest Killare, and he has won that seat. The independent Gavin Priestley has finished a close third to Labor, but John Cobb will go on to win that seat and be returned to Parliament for the new seat for the seat of Killare. He previously represented Parkes.
Charlton in the New South Wales Hunter region.
You see a new member here, Greg Combay, replacing Kelly Hoare, former ACTU president. Greg Combay's easily been returned to Parliament, easily elected for the first time.
Chifley in the Sydney outer western suburbs.
A swing of 8% has re-elected Roger Price. He's been in the Parliament since 1984, and he's got his margin up above 20% again.
Cook now in Sydney's southern suburbs.
Well, there's been a 6% swing to Labor, but Scott Morrison replaces Bruce Baird as the member for Cook. So Scott Morrison, former State Director in New South Wales, is the new member for Cook.
This one that we looked at closely, Cowper on the New South Wales north coast.
Well, there's been a substantial swing, and 5.9% at the end of the night. The Nationals will hold this by a margin of under 1%, so that's been a big swing, but Luke Hartsucker should still be able to return to Parliament.
Cunningham in the New South Wales Illawarra district.
Sharon Bird substantially increased the majority. She's up 6.3%, the swing to her.
Dobell, New South Wales Central Coast.
He's a Labor gain. A swing of almost 9% puts Craig Thompson. I think he's a Health Services Union official into Parliament, replacing Ken Ticehurst, who's represented the seat for the last 2 terms.
Eden Monero in the New South Wales southeast corner.
This is the one of 3 Labor's military recruits. Mike Kelly is the one to be elected. Again, Eden Monero goes with the trend. It's gone with government, and Mike Kelly replaces Gary Nairn as the member for Eden Monero with a swing of 6.7% in the end.
Farrer, the New South Wales southern border.
Well, it's a swing of 5%, but Susan Lee, has been returned as the member for Farrer. That seat extends all the way up to Broken Hill now, but she's been returned in the Alford seat.
Fowler in Sydney's southwestern suburbs.
A very safe Labor seat held by Julia Irwin, and she's been very easily returned.
Gilmore now in the New South Wales south coast.
Yes, and my friend None of the Above has finished 5th. Joanna Gash is easily returned. She's had a swing of 5.7% against her, but she has been returned, although the seat is now marginal.
And Graindler in Sydney's inner west.
Anthony Albanese, he's on 56%. He's had a swing of 3.6 to him. The Greens have finished 3rd. The question was, would they finish 2nd? But Anthony Albanese is easily returned on those figures.
Greenway in Sydney's western suburbs.
Well, this was a seat that was made much safer by the redistribution, but there's been an 8.5% swing to the Labor Party. Louise Marcus has been returned, but there's been an enormous swing in that seat.
Hughes in Sydney's southern suburbs.
Another big swing here, 6.4%, but Dana Vale will be returned. She'll hold on to that seat. She won it in 1996.
Hume, the New South Wales southern rural seat.
A 9.6% swing, an 8.9% swing leaves this seat very marginal. Albie Schultz will be returned, though. He's held the seat since 1998.
Kingsford Smith with its famous
we've got Hunter member first.
Oh, well,
Hunter Joel Fitzgibbon, who has been returned. He's got a 5% swing to him. He succeeded his father in 1996. He spent his first 11 years in opposition, but now he's going to be a government member.
All right, Peter Garrett's seat of Kingsford Smith now.
4% swing to Peter Garrett. He's been easily returned. No difficulty for Peter Garrett. It'll be interesting to see what portfolio he gets after his problems with the environment during the campaign.
One of the most interesting seats in the whole election, Lindsay in Sydney's outer western suburbs.
And also by far one of the biggest seats swings in New South Wales, with just under 10%. David Bradbury, his 3rd attempt, wins the seat. Karen Chidjoff, like David Bradbury, doesn't even need preferences.
Low in Sydney's inner western suburbs.
A very safe Labor seat now. It's 4.4%, so John Murphy returned there.
Lyne, New South Wales north coast.
This is Mark Vale's seat. He's had a 5% swing against him. but he doesn't even need to go to preferences, so Mark Vaile returned Deputy Prime Minister. We'll see if he continues on as the leader of the National Party.
Macarthur in Sydney's outer southwest.
Well, this is the biggest swing we've seen in New South Wales, 11%. Pat Farmer at the end of the night, he's on 50.1, so he will probably hold on to it on preferences, but it looks like Macarthur has gone within 0.5% of maintaining the trend of being held by the party that won government since 1949. But at this stage, you'd bet Pat Farmer is more likely to win that seat, but it's still a huge swing.
OK, Mackellar, Sydney's Northern Beach seat.
Bronwyn Bishop is returned. She's had a 3% swing against her.
And, well, it seems sort of frozen there for a time being.
We've got Macquarie next. Macquarie is the seat which was, here we go, Bob Debus. He's a former state member for I've got to get back myself. Bob Debus, he's replaced Kerry Bartlett as the sitting Liberal MP, but the seat was made notionally Labor held on the new boundaries. Bob Debus is a former state MP for Blue Mountains, former Attorney General in the state, in the Carr government, and he's been returned replacing Kerry Bartlett as a member from Macquarie.
Mitchell in Sydney's northwestern suburbs.
Well, there's been a huge swing here, 10% swing to Labor. Alan Cadman was defeated for Liberal endorsement by Alex Hawke, former Liberal young president. So Alex Hawke enters the Parliament, and Alan Cadman, who was elected at the same election as John Howard, leaves Parliament at the same election as well, by the look of it.
Independents are sort of rare species these days, but New England has one.
62% for Tony Windsor. He's got no difficulty holding on to that seat.
Newcastle, the New South Wales Hunter region.
Sharon Grierson returned, 51.1%. She has a 6% swing to her, no difficulty at all.
Now North Sydney, another interesting seat because of one of our colleagues, or former colleagues.
Yeah, well, Joe Hockey has had no difficulty holding on to that seat, 51.6%. Joe Hockey's held that seat with a swing of 4% against him.
Page on the New South Wales North Coast.
Huge 8% swing has delivered this seat to Janelle Saffin. She'll win it on green preferences, but there's an 8% swing in Janelle Saffin, a former Labor MLC for the New South Wales Upper House, is the new member for Page.
Parkes on the New South Wales North West.
I should mention this Parkes is basically the old seat of Guida, which John Anderson was the member for. John Anderson is retired at this election. A big vote there for Tim Horan, the independent, 21%, but Mark Coulton will go on to win this seat for the National Party, replacing John Cobb. The member for Parkes is one Calare, and John Anderson is retired as a member for Guida, but Mark Coulton is a new National Party MP.
All right, another one of these interesting mortgage belt seats, Parramatta in Sydney's western suburbs.
It's not so much mortgage belt, but it's certainly Julie Owens. As she needed a swing to her, she got a substantial swing to her because the redistribution damaged her chances. Colin Robinson was an ETU member, in the union official, I think, as well. So anyway, Bob Baldwin in Patterson, up around the Hunter, he's been returned. There's been a 5.5% swing. This margin is under 1%, but Bob Baldwin holds that seat. Gin Arneman, she's second attempt running for Parliament in that local area. He tried to win the state seat recently, but missed out there.
OK, prospect now in the New South Wales outer western suburbs.
Chris Bowen is a Labor front bencher, and he's got a substantial swing to him, 7%, and he's easily held that seat.
Reid in Sydney's western suburbs.
Laurie Ferguson, easily elected there. Brother of Martin Ferguson and the son of a former Labor Deputy Premier of New South Wales.
Richmond now, the New South Wales North Coast.
6.5% swing to Labor, so Justine Elliott is holding this seat with a margin that Labor would have only ever dreamed of once upon a time, 7.8%, so Justine Elliott easily elected. A big vote for the Greens in that seat.
OK, Riverina in the New South Wales southern rural districts.
Kay Hull is elected. She's got a 4.9% swing against her, but she easily holds that safe seat in the Riverina district.
Robertson, the New South Wales Central Coast.
At the end of the night, this looks like a Labor gain. It will go down to postals and absence, but at this stage it looks like Labor could go on to win that seat. Belinda Neal, a former senator, could win that seat at this election.
Shortland, the New South Wales Hunter region.
Jill Hall easily returned that safe seat in the Central Coast.
And Sydney, in Sydney's inner city.
Tanya Plibersek easily returned. The Greens have polled very well there, 21%. Tanya will go to preferences, but she'll win the seat easily with a substantial swing to her in the end.
Throsby, the New South Wales Illawarra.
Another former ACTU president, Jenny George, a 9.3% swing. That's my parents' seat if they're still up watching. Hope you've had a good night, but Jenny George easily returned and she's got a swing to her.
Well, here's a seat that stayed loyal to Tony Abbott no matter what happened during the campaign, Warringah.
One of the smallest swings in the state. Warringah's easily returned 1.5% swing. Tony Abbott comfortably returned.
Watson in the New South Wales southern suburbs.
Tony Burke, Labor's immigration spokesman, has got a 5.5% swing to him. He's been easily returned.
Okay, Wentworth, the seat we looked at very closely, and Malcolm Turnbull returned.
Wentworth, we've got Malcolm Turnbull has been elected there, 49.9%. He doesn't even need preference. He may not even need preferences. He's been easily returned. He's got one of only 4 swings to the Liberal Party in the country.
Werriwa.
This is Mark Latham's old seat. Chris Hayes won it when Latham resigned at a by-election. Chris Hayes has been easily returned in Gough Whitlam's former seat, John Kerrin's former seat, and Mark Latham's former seat.
Okay, we'll move on to South Australia now. If we can pull up the graphic for South Australia, and here it comes.
What we're seeing in South Australia is a swing of 6.8%, which is one of the bigger in the country, and he's delivered a definite 3 seats with at least 1 seat left in hands.
Okay, well, let's go to the first seat in South Australia. That is Adelaide inner city.
Well, this is extremely marginal on the last election result, but there's a 6% swing to Labor, and Kate Ellis easily returned as the member for Adelaide.
Okay, Barker now in the South Australian rural southeast.
Patrick Secker has been easily returned. He's gone to preferences. There's an 11% swing to Labor in the end, but Patrick Secker easily returned.
Here's another seat Labor were hopeful of gaining, but didn't, Boothby.
Well, clearly Nicole Corns did not work well with the electorate. There's only a 2% swing, which is one of the smallest in South Australia, and Andrew Southcott returned.
Okay, the outback seat of Grey.
Well, there was a big swing in the end, 9.3%, but Rowan Ramsey will replace Wakelin. He's, I was going to say Darryl Wakelin, that's one of his nephews who used to play for St Kilda, but Mr Wakelin is retired, and Rowan Ramsey is the new Liberal MP for Grey.
And we'll go to Hindmarsh now in the Adelaide western suburbs.
5% swing to Steve Georgianis, who won this at the last election, and he's easily returned in Hindmarsh.
Kingston in Adelaide's southern suburbs.
Amanda Rishworth for the Labor Party replaces Kim Richardson as the member for Kingston. That was a very easy victory for her in the end with a 4.3%. It was a very marginal seat beforehand.
Another seat we looked at very closely, Macon in the Adelaide northeast suburbs.
Enormous swing here with Tony Zappi getting an 8.8% swing. He wins it easily, doesn't even need preferences, replacing Trish Draper or Trish Worth. I've forgotten.
Trish Draper, I think.
She's retiring member. Trish Draper's the retiring member.
Yes. Okay, Mayo, Alexander Downer's seat in the Adelaide Hills.
My brain and my mouth are getting tired of this time of night. But Alexander Downer is easily returned in Mayo. He doesn't even need preferences. It's a safe Liberal seat, and Alexander Downer's returned.
All right, Port Adelaide now.
This is where Rod Sawford is retiring, and the new Labor member is Mark Butler, and he's got a substantial swing to him in this safe Labor seat.
All right, another former Cabinet Minister, I guess, Christopher Pyne, not Cabinet Minister, but Minister. Christopher Pyne and Sturt.
Minister for Ageing, he's been returned. He's had a 6.4% swing against him. Mia Hanshin was a high-profile Labor candidate, but Labor's fallen just short at the end of this campaign, and he will be returned as the member for Sturt.
Wakefield in Northern Adelaide.
Nick Champion wins this seat for the Labor Party, defeating David Fawcett, who won it for the first time at the last election.
Okay, now we go to Queensland, which of course was one of the most interesting states in the election, and we'll just look for our graphic.
The swing in Queensland was just enormous tonight, and it's Queensland that's delivered Labor victory at this election. Only the 3rd time since the war that Labor's got a majority of the vote in Queensland, and by far the biggest swing was in Queensland. And the first seat in Queensland is Blair.
Yes, in Ipswich in the Brisbane Valley.
And Shane Newman has won this at his 2nd attempt, defeating Cameron Thompson, who'd held this seat since defeating Pauline Hanson in 1998. So Labor gains Blair.
Okay, Bonner now in the Brisbane inner eastern suburbs.
Labor gains Bonner. Kerry Ray, a local councillor on Brisbane City Council, defeats Ross Vasta for the Liberal Party, who won it on the seat's creation at the last election.
Bowman in Brisbane's Bayside suburbs.
This one's a real line ball at the end of the night. Andrew Lamming's slightly ahead on the primary votes of Labor's Jason Young. We've got it, I think, under 200 votes at the end of the night. So that one's Labor's just ahead at the end of the night.
Okay, the inner city suburb of Brisbane. I beg your pardon, seat of Brisbane.
This is Arch Bevis's seat. He's had a 2.9% swing to him. Arch Bevis has been easily returned.
Okay, Capricornia up in Rockhampton and central Queensland.
A big 8% swing to Labor, so Capricornia certainly didn't suffer on the council amalgamation issue in that electorate. A worry for the National Party is the Liberals have nearly outpolled them in that seat, which is not a good sign for the future of the National Party in central Queensland.
Another seat in central Queensland, Mackay and Bowen included Dawson.
This is an enormous upset. Deanne Kelly has held this seat since 1996, and James Bidgood, who runs a chain of locals, the finance manager from a chain of local medical clinics, has easily won with a massive swing of almost 14%. So that's a huge swing in that election.
Dixon in Brisbane's outer northern suburbs.
This is another Labor gain. Well, Labor's got a 9.2%. I think there'll be a bit more counting in this one. Peter Dutton could yet win this on postals and absence. He could yet turn that gap around. But at this stage, it looks like Peter Dutton may well lose that seat. Like Cheryl Curnow before him in 1998, he'll be hanging around for another 2 weeks to know the result in that election.
Indeed he will. Now Fadden in the northern Gold Coast.
David Joel retired in this election for a long-time Member of Parliament. Stuart Robert is the new Liberal member for Fadden, replacing David Joel.
Fairfax in the northern Sunshine Coast.
Alex Somley has been returned easily in that seat. It's a very safe seat in the northern part of the Sunshine Coast, so Alex Somley is returned.
Fisher in the Sunshine Coast and Caloundra.
Interesting, there was an independent here, Carolyn Hutchison, the local radio broadcaster, has polled 14%, and Peter Slipper's had a substantial drop in his vote. There's an 8% swing to Labor, but Peter Slipper, former National Party MP for the seat, been a Liberal Party MP for the seat since '93, has been easily returned.
OK, let's have a look at Flynn in central Queensland and Gladstone.
This appears to be a Labor gain. This was one that some people wrote off because of the council amalgamation issue, but Chris Trevor is set to win this seat. He's got 47% of the primary vote. There's a 9% swing after preferences, and Chris Trevor will win that seat at this stage.
All right, here's another one with a trend of strange things happening when people retire, when members retire. Ford, an extraordinary result in South Queensland, outer southern Brisbane.
This is the biggest seat, biggest swing. Brett Ragoose wins it. He's a former graphic artist and a teacher. Wendy Creighton has been defeated. She's trying to replace Kay Elson, who's a long-time member since '96. But yeah, that's a Labor swing with a Labor win with a huge swing on the edge of Brisbane.
OK, Griffith, Brisbane's inner southern suburbs.
Not much of a swing for Kevin Rudd, only 3.7%, but as far as Kevin Rudd and the Labor Party is concerned, it's most important that they got the swing where they're required. There was a PM Howard stood in this seat, you may notice, and he finished fourth with 2.4% of the vote.
Groom, Toowoomba and Darling Downs.
A big swing, 10% against Ian McFarlane, but he will be still returned as the member. He's the Minister for Industry.
All right, Herbert and Townsville.
Labor is a nose ahead at the end of the night, an eyelash ahead. Peter Lindsay's been returned, so it looks like... no, too close to call that one.
Hinkler, Bundaberg and Hervey Bay.
The Nationals have retained that Paul Neville. It's only a 6.8% swing, so Paul Neville's been returned in that seat.
Kennedy in Queensland's northern outback.
Bob Katter's not got much of a change in his primary vote. Bob Katter has been easily returned, though. He will be returned on National Party preferences.
Leichhardt, another very interesting seat, Cairns and Cape York.
Well, we've got a bigger swing, 14.8. Jim Turner is the new member for Leichhardt. Simply enormous swing that's occurred, 14.8%. Warren Ench retired, and this has just been a huge swing, and Jim Turner is the new member for Leichhardt.
All right, the incoming Treasurer's seat of Lilly.
He's only got a 3% swing to him, but Wayne Swan's been comfortably returned.
And Longman, Caboolture and the southern Sunshine Coast.
A 10% swing. Mal Brough, the Minister for Indigenous Affairs and Community Services, has been defeated with a huge swing. John Sullivan is a former state member for the seat, and his wife is currently a state member for one of the local seats. So that's a huge upset and a big loss for the Liberal Party, because Mal Brough has developed quite a profile in the party recently.
And a very passionate speech from Mal Brough as he gave up his seat. Maranoa, southern outback.
Bruce Scott returned with a 7.5% swing in that seat.
McPherson and the southern Gold Coast.
There was some talk of Labor winning this seat, but there's only a 5.2% swing, and Margaret May's been easily returned in that seat.
Moncrief, the northern Gold Coast.
Stephen Chobo's been easily returned. He's got a 5.3% swing to the Labor Party.
Morton in Brisbane's inner southern suburbs.
Another Labor gain, 7.6%. Graham Perrott at his second attempt defeats Gary Hardgrave, who'd held it since 1996.
Oxley in Brisbane's southwestern suburbs.
Bernie Ripoll wins his seat, 7.5% swing to him. Very easy victory for Bernie Ripoll.
Okay, Petrie in Brisbane's northern suburbs.
Well, another seat they talked about, the council amalgamations being affected, in the end hasn't mattered. Teresa Gambaro, another one of the 96 members elected in 96, goes out with a tide in 2007, and Yvette Darth, a union official, is the new Labor member for Petrie.
Rankin in Brisbane's southern suburbs.
Craig Emerson has been returned with a 9% swing to him and easily returned to the parliament.
Ryan in Brisbane's western suburbs.
6.8%. There's a lot of talk that Michael Johnson could lose this seat. In the end, he hasn't. The swing is just under 7%, but the Liberals, this seat is a very small margin now, but the Liberals have retained Ryan at least.
Okay, Wide Bay, which includes Maryborough, Gympie and Noosa.
Yes, well, there's some interest there because of the Traveston Dam issue. Warren Truss will be easily returns a 4% swing to Labor. Kate Malloy's a former state Labor MP, and she was running on the Traveston Dam issue, but she really hasn't had much impact in the end.
Okay, we'll have a look at the seats in the Northern Territory now.
Well, we'll just look at the two seats, which the first one is Lingiari. Warren Snowden's been easily returned, a 2.6% swing to him.
And Solomon, which looks like it may slip away from Dave Tolner.
Yes, we've got Dave Tolner, Labor on 50.2 at the end of the night, so that could be turned around by postals and absence and declaration votes, but at the end of the night, Dave Tolner's just fallen behind.
Okay, let's have a look at the swing in Western Australia.
Let me drive a few computer keyboards here. This is a state where the smaller swings occurred, 2.1% to Labor, but we've seen seats go both ways in Western Australia.
Let's have a look at the first of them, Brand.
And departure in this seat, of course, with Kim Beazley retiring and Gary Gray, former National Secretary. He's the new member for Brand, replacing Kim Beazley with a 1.5% swing to him.
All right, Canning now in Perth's southeastern suburbs.
There's a 4% swing to Labor, but Don Randall will be easily returned as the member for Canning.
Cowan in Perth's northern suburbs.
Well, the Liberal Party have gained this. Luke Simpkins, at his second attempt, wins this seat. Graham Edwards was retiring. Labor's Liz Prime hasn't been able to hang on to his very strong personal support, and Luke Simpkins wins the seat of Cowan, a Liberal gain, the only one so far in this election.
Curtin in Perth's western suburbs.
Not much change here, only a 1% swing against Julie Bishop, the Education Minister, and Liberals hold Curtin.
Forrest in WA's southwestern corner.
There was some interest in how the independent Noel Brunning would run. He was a former newsreader in the area. He's got 12% of the vote, just under. Jeffrey Prosser retired here, and Nola Marino is the new Labor, new Liberal member for Forrest, replacing Jeff Prosser.
Keep those lips working. Have a bit of a drink there, Anthony. Fremantle in metropolitan Perth.
Another significant departure, Dr. Carmen Lawrence retiring. Melissa Park, who's a very senior lawyer, is the new Labor member for Fremantle.
Okay, Hasluck in metropolitan Perth.
This one is a Labor gain, a swap for Cowan. Stuart Henry won this seat at the last election, defeating Sharon Jackson. This time Sharon Jackson comes back and returns the favour. She will defeat Stuart Henry on preferences. There's a 3% swing to Labor in Hasluck.
Okay, we go to Kalgoorlie now, I think, although it's not coming up.
Kalgoorlie's got a 3.8% swing to Labor. Barry Hass has been returned as the member for Kalgoorlie.
And more in Perth's outer northern suburbs.
Mal Wash has easily returned, only a small swing against him. He'll continue to hold that safe northern Perth seat.
O'Connor in WA's wheat belt.
Well, Wilson Tuckey is going to be forced to preferences. This stage, I think he'll probably end up holding on to that seat, but the preferences of the Greens and the Labor Party will assist the National Party. I suspect Wilson will do well enough with the postal votes to hold on to that, but that is a seat where he will be run a close contest by the National Party, but I expect Wilson Tuckey will still be returned. Right. But that's certainly a result I hadn't seen tonight.
No, nor I. Pearce in outer Perth in the Avon Valley.
Juden Mullen has been returned. She's easily retained that seat.
And Perth, Stephen Smith's seat. He was here congratulating his staff members on the floor.
Stephen Smith returned. He's got a 2% swing to him. No difficulty holding on to that seat.
Sterling in Perth's northern suburbs.
Well, there's been a swing of 0.8% to Labor's Peter Tinley, another one of the military recruits, but Michael Keenan has hung on to that seat. The Labor Party wasn't able to generate enough of a swing.
Swan in Perth's inner southern suburbs.
This could yet be a loss for the Liberal Party. The Labor Party is just behind at the end of the night. We're estimating their overall prediction is 49.8. That seat's too close to call. Kim Wilkie has got a battle on his hand against Steve Irons, but he'd know about that because he had the same problem at the end of the night last time.
And finally, Tangney in Perth's southern suburbs.
Dennis Jensen, nuclear physicist, the technician, he actually lost endorsement for this election and had to be re-endorsed by the state executive. He's had no difficulty winning the seat, though, maintaining the numbers there. 3% swing to Labor, but he's been held onto the seat.
And that is the call of the board.
Okay, and we're now close to the end of our telecast for tonight. It has been a long night, but it's been quite a remarkable one and a historic one. Just to recap some of what has happened tonight, Labor has won office with the biggest swing in Australia since Malcolm Fraser won after the turbulence of the Whitlam sacking in 1975. Kevin Rudd has led Labor into power with a majority of around 22. They needed 16 seats to claim government, and in fact they've gained somewhere around 24 or 25. The story of this win revolves around Queensland and New South Wales. Queensland, where Labor has a net gain of 10 seats, and New South Wales a gain of 7 seats. And one of those New South Wales seats that's likely to go to Labor is the seat of Bennelong, held by the Prime Minister. This is a double blow for John Howard. He went very close to conceding Bennelong as well as conceding the loss of government tonight. Maxine McHugh was the endorsed Labor candidate for that seat earlier this year, and she has campaigned the life out of it, gained a swing in the process of more than 5%, and John Howard will now battle to hold that seat. If he doesn't, the second sitting Prime Minister to lose his seat in Australian history.